Now I'm unmuted. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stochastic NFL Draft Live Watch Along. Of course, NFL Draft Round 2 going on right now. Fantasy relevant players flying off the board as we speak. A ton of tight ends. The great question marks around that one. Will Levis. We'll talk about it all coming up here. I am Chris Spags, joined today by the man who is, I would say, previously known as the Showdown Shaman. Today, Neil, though, you are the NFL Draft Shaman, the second round Shaman. How are you doing, Neil?
That's right. I'm doing great here. I saw we already got a question in chat about putting mayo in your coffee. Spencer Smith has asked us on a few streams now. What do you think, Spags? You ever going to try mayo in your coffee?
I mean, Levis is doing all those things that are like, he's obviously a jacked dude. He's eating the banana peels, which apparently have some vitamin benefits. He's doing the mayo and the coffee, I presume, to hit caloric goals, fat goals. So like, he's clearly looking better than any of us. I guess maybe not Isaiah, but besides that though, he's looking better than any of us. So we should maybe take some tips besides how to throw a football, I think.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah. Of course, got to introduce my other co-host here. The first time we're doing a stream together. So, and I should have asked how to pronounce your last name in advance, but I'm going to go with Isaiah Sirois.
Is that That's remarkably close. Sirois. Yeah. Very good job.
So I'm excited.
That's remarkably close. Isaiah. What are our standards here?
You're crushing the betting streets. Cool last name. All the things I'm looking for in a co-host. So how are you doing, Isaiah?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of these skill position players fly off the board.
Yep. So we got a lot to hit on here. Of course, this show is also being sponsored by Underdog Fantasy, and I wearing the hat, so you know I love them. Of course, you got to play over there. Best Ball Mania 4 launches this weekend. $3 million to first place. That is a prize that you are not going to find in your usual DFS tournaments out there. And of course, Underdog will also give you a special offer. They're going to double your deposit on Underdog up to $100. You sign up using the promo code STOCHASTIC, STOKASTIC, or use the link in the description down below. You got to be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But if you're not concerned, go play an Underdog. And again, Best Ball Mania 4. I mean, Neil, I know you've been doing it. I'm sure Isaiah's been doing it too. Best Ball Mania 4 is a very exciting tournament to be in. I made the finals last year. I know you had a few bullets as well. Didn't end that well for us with Buffalo, Cincinnati not happening, but still great fun to be in there. And you really do pay off the knowledge if you are a person like us who cares about football this time of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I cannot blame that game being canceled because I had 0 players in that game. It actually benefited me that game was canceled. I was my lineups were, but I had a couple that were in the top 400, 300 or so. So can't complain about how I finished in Best Ball Mania 4. Yeah, I've maxed out the last couple Best Ball Manias, and I've got a couple cacti to prove it. Who knows? Do you think they're going to send us anything cool this year, Spags?
Wait, so is that what you get for maxing out? Because I've seen people get that, and I'm pretty sure I maxed out, but I might have had one entry thrown out, so I might have ended up at 149.
Oh, no.
Cactus. Yeah, I didn't get a cactus.
So I think it was because the Super Bowl was in Arizona. So I think the reasoning was because it was in Arizona, they sent us cacti. I don't know where the Super Bowl is. It in Vegas this year?
Sounds like a place that would host.
They're going to send us a stripper.
Or yes, send you some illicit baggies of unknown places. Isaiah, how are you feeling about the draft so far? We're going to go kind of through some of the key picks here. Will Levis, I think, is going to be a name that people are going to be curious to hear about here. Of course, the draft is going on as we speak as well, so some players are going to be coming through as we go. But who are you most excited about to see going so far on day 2?
So far on day 2, I think the Will Levis move to Tennessee is probably the biggest shoe to drop. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans might be moving on from Ryan Tannehill. I think Will Levis is a pretty exciting passer. He offers a pretty diverse, or not a diverse skill set, but he offers a very strong arm coming out of Kentucky. I think he's relatively pro-ready. Getting him in the second round is quite a value for Tennessee. So it'll definitely shake things up when it comes to ADP for Tennessee's wide receivers, because if they have Levis under center, that's certainly a much different and much more high upside signal caller than Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis.
So how are you looking, Neil? I know you had prepared some of the ADPs in advance. We're going to talk about that as we go, but Levis was one of those guys that I think started a little bit hot, then sort of the buzz out there became sort of obvious that he wasn't going to be treated with the same prestige as those other QBs. Then he kind of got steamed up last minute, and it does feel like overall, though, he was treated as a lower drafted player. Do you feel like he goes up now? Does he go down? Because there is clearly a starter in Tennessee, and Will Levis might be playing by week 17, but he's probably not playing from day 1, you would think.
You would think that. Now, I'm trying to find where his ADP is. I would imagine he goes up. So I think that I did not draft any Will Levis, to be honest. Everything that I heard about him all offseason was that he's not very good. Yeah, ADP of 221. Or 218, I guess. I have to imagine that he jumps up from that number. It's a good line. I like Treylon Burks. Clearly a nice spot for him in terms of the skill position players that he's surrounded by. So I do think it's a nice spot for. Is my screen not showing? Apparently, I need to refresh what I've got going on here.
Yeah, but I have the ADP pulled up. He is right under your guy Baker Mayfield and right above Desmond Ritter when it comes to quarterback ADP.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I don't know if that changes much here.
No, I would think he probably stays pretty close to flat. I think maybe if there's some camp reports that come out during the summer, you could see him start to come up. And I guess that would sort of lend some credence to drafting him a little bit now. I just felt like coming into this draft, like he was not a ready-made prospect, certainly built like a Greek god. And that's why we're all putting mayo in our coffee now. But besides that, like just a guy who was inaccurate as a passer, was also a negative EPA as a rusher, which stands out to me as a thing where they're building him up as being Josh Allen. He's not great at throwing deep balls. He's not great as a rusher. Anthony Richardson is a lot closer to Josh Allen than I think we are going to see Levis be. But I feel like he's just not the most exciting prospect in Tennessee. We know offensively, kind of a slog of a team. So I feel like Levis staying flat and maybe coming up a little bit, but he definitely is not going to come up as much as Richardson, who will be an easy top 100 pick.
Oh yeah, you think so? So here's a question that I posed yesterday to Nick Lepre was who do you think is going to be the higher ADP between Richardson and Daniel Jones, Spags?
Ooh, that's tough. I think it's Daniel Jones most recently was at, and I might have a different number than you here because I have different sheets everywhere. He had a 98.3 ADP was the most recent one I was seeing in the big board. I was discussing with my podcast partner, Pete Overzet, on Splash Play today. I think I could see the crowd talking themselves into drafting him ahead of Tua, I think, is the concussion stuff, even though I don't know that I agree with that. I can see people talking themselves into drafting Richardson ahead of Dak Prescott. I think Dak is sort of where that jump is. I think Richardson gets to 85-ish, but the enthusiasm for Isaiah, I mean, like people saw the combine, people loved what Richardson did. I feel like the enthusiasm level might put him even higher than he probably should be numerically.
What do you think, Isaiah?
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I mean, if you're looking at, so I assume we're talking about Richardson here. If we're talking about Richardson, looking at the combine stats, I think that he is to the moon really with the Colts, knowing that they will probably give him a shot pretty early. Less so with Levis, that obviously stands to change, given the fact that Tannehill, who is right above Baker Mayfield in underdog ADP, fun fact, could end up getting cut from the team before the season starts or replaced halfway through. So I'm still shaky on Levis. I agree with you guys that Richardson is really the better rookie quarterback prospect here, and I'm definitely penciling in Richardson above Daniel Jones for sure, just raw upside wise.
Let's talk about some of the other picks that have gone on here. And if you guys can't hit the like button, we appreciate that a bunch here. Of course, we're always fighting those YouTube algorithms, and we appreciate you guys choosing to hang out with us on a Friday nights. But please support the channel, hit the like button, and to do it really for any YouTube creators that you enjoy. We got Will Levis going, and then we did have a pretty good run of some of the tight ends. And two guys that I think it's interesting the order they went in. Sam Laporta going at 34, Michael Mayer going at 35. Mayer came in kind of the consensus tight end one. Dalton Kincaid has been steamed up a little bit just because of really outlier performances crushing my favorite USC Trojans at Utah, but also Mayer, just I think a better player all around than, just in terms of being a blocker, a less explosive pass catcher. But Isaiah, how are you feeling about Laporta versus Mayer? Because I didn't think it should be that close. And I like Laporta, but I thought Mayer was a clear tight end too. You could have made the case to put ahead of Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, that was really surprising to see Sam Laporta go that early. I guess the argument for it is if you watched Iowa this year, you saw how reliant on the tight ends they were. So it's not shocking. Laporta is used to playing a very high volume role in an offense. We've seen him succeed in that kind of capacity. Obviously, Michael Mayer did too. But it's not super shocking to see an Iowa tight end. I'm pretty sure that's where Hawkinson and Fant went. So if I'm getting that right. So yeah, it's not really shocking to see an Iowa tight end go as early as Sam Laporta did. There is certainly the pedigree there. So I'm not stunned. I'm surprised to see that he went before Mayer, but I'm not stunned to see him go as early as he did.
Neil, how are you feeling about the Laporta versus Mayer thing? Because Laporta was basically an undrafted player. He and Luke Musgrave were guys I was taking at the end of pretty much every draft in the first big board, and then sometimes the super flex too. And it is a pretty big ADP difference. Laporta in the closing of the big board was around 236. And then we had Mayer at basically looks like around 170, 169-ish. So how are you feeling about these guys relative to where, draft capital now puts Laporta slightly ahead of Mayer, but also it does seem like Laporta could get steamed up quite a bit, whereas Mayer, I don't know if he comes up a lot in terms of ADP.
I mean, we saw how the Lions did not really use TJ Hawkinson all that much. So that kind of makes me question, like, all right, TJ Hawkinson clearly, like, he traded to the Vikings. Suddenly he's a star in terms of, at least in terms of fantasy sports, looked really good on the Vikings. He was really underutilized by the Lions. So I'm kind of thinking, if they're not going to use TJ Hawkinson, are they really going to use Sam Laporta? So I think they'll probably, get, he'll move up in the ranks a little bit from the 242 or whatever it was, 236. I forget what it was exactly. ADP here that he was being drafted at. Where was he? Sam, yeah, 242 ADP. No, I'm trying to, I think 236 ADP makes him, I don't quite understand what's going on with these numbers, but whatever
yeah,
this is.
I'm at 236, I think.
All right, 236 ADP. I imagine he does pick up a little bit of steam here because he is now probably, I think he's the TE1 for the Lions. So I do think that Laporta gains a little bit here. I still would rather have Michael Mayer. If I'm choosing between these two, Michael Mayer, clearly the one who is being drafted higher throughout the season, throughout the underdog early drafts. Going, where was he? I thought I had him here earlier. Yeah, 169 ADP. I still think that he's in a better spot, replacing Darren Waller there for the Raiders. I think of the two of them, I'm going to prefer Michael Mayer over Sam Laporta. But I do think Laporta being drafted here by the Lions, it closes the gap at least a little bit. What do you think, Spags?
I mean, so I do like Mayer a good amount. Like Kincaid was just my guy because, again, you see him put out really outlier numbers, like over 200 receiving yards in a game in college as a tight end. To me, is just crazy. And the skill, the ability for him to play out of the slot, I thought was pretty prominent. But Mayer, I mean, I'm pulling his numbers from Sports Info Solutions, which I use all of my college data for. 35.7% target per route run rate for Mayer this year, which is tops in all the tight ends. I think actually might be tops amongst the receivers too. Also, an okay 0.13 ADPA per target. The thing that stands out for me with Mayer is he really crushed in the red zone, had a 0.586 EPA, getting about 2 red zone targets per game. Was also good inside the 5, had a 0.706 EPA per target. So you are talking about like a guy that I don't think the baby Gronk nickname is that appropriate, but he is a guy that was really creating value and dominating in short space. And I think if he can start to extend that out a little bit, it's going to look good. And I think too, when you have Devontae Adams, and Jimmy Garoppolo just being kind of a competent caretaker QB, I think that all bodes well for Mayer. Laporta, I could see getting steamed up a lot just because the Lions, people love the Lions. Like Jameson Williams was really high up there in some of the drafts. Yeah. So, I think to me, I'd prefer Mayer, but if Laporta is going to stay, let's say 20 picks behind Mayer, I think you could talk yourself into Laporta just on the inertia of that Lions offense. But Isaiah, how are you feeling about, I guess, the overall prospects of the Lions now? Because they have really reached in terms of draft capital with Gibbs yesterday. Obviously, Laporta too had some medical red flags. They could have probably taken him a little bit later. Are you buying in on the Lions renaissance?
Ooh, not at this point. They've made some really questionable moves here, getting a linebacker when they did and getting a running back when they did. Those feel like relative overinvestments given what they could have gotten instead. As far as the betting markets go, I am not rushing to back the Lions to win the division anymore. I'm not rushing to get them over their win total. As far as things like best ball go, I think there's a little bit too many cooks in the kitchen, especially with a quarterback like Jared Goff under center. The offensive line in Detroit is obviously phenomenal, which will definitely help out everyone there. But when you have so many different mouths to feed, especially once you get everyone back from suspensions, it's going to be pretty hard to break down. I will say, I think maybe the most exciting move was a pick we haven't touched on yet, Luke Musgrave going to Green Bay. That's really interesting to me.
What do you think about Musgrave? Because it's sort of hard to evaluate him based on just what he did this year. He only played in 2 games, but was like phenomenal in the 2 games in a way that stand out in a big way numerically. Where are you with him overall? Because he is a huge bodied guy. I think 6'6", over 250 pounds, and was apparently faster than he ran to the combine. There were before the combine reports that he might be able to run the 4.4s. I think he ran a 4.6 or something, but a legit big bodied guy who's fast, get downfield, and an offense that needs some weapons. So where are you landing on him, Isaiah?
So if you look at the ADP right now, Luke Musgrave currently slots in right behind Sam Laporta. I think that at least flips, if not Luke Musgrave going up considerably higher, purely because of how much athleticism he has shown in his workouts and at the combine. He obviously ran a 4.640. That's still really, really solid for a tight end. He has a 94th percentile speed score. I think that he has the athletic profile to be exceptional at tight end, especially this year in a relatively thin offense that is rebuilding. Jordan Love will still have Christian Watson, but Allen Lazard is gone. There were a lot of old, aging guys on that offense that I think are going to get replaced. I think that Luke Musgrave has a fantastic opportunity to shine right off the bat in Green Bay. And I know that there is generally skepticism of rookie tight ends, especially in fantasy football. But Luke Musgrave, as far as being I think the 4th tight end off the board in the real life draft, I think that's a great value for Green Bay, and I think that won't overinflate his ADP too much as far as best ball drafts go.
Neil, have you any thoughts on Luke Musgrave, a guy that I think was not, the buzziest name throughout the draft process? I think even Laporta started to pick up a little bit more buzz in terms of the fantasy community and talking about him, but it is going to be a pretty cheap Packer stack overall. I think some question marks with Jordan Love, and we were talking about Detroit's futures, but I think Green Bay's actual chance to win the NFC North is probably as good as it's been, at least, in terms of what you'd expect relative to Aaron Rodgers, your Hall of Fame QB being shipped out of town. So where would you buy in on Luke Musgrave, Neil?
First of all, that is ridiculous, Spags. The Packers ain't winning shit this year. I'm a Vikings fan, of course, so I might be a little bit biased here, but come on now. Packers, they're not doing anything this year.
I think the Vikings only have an 8.5 win total the last I saw, and the Packers were 7.5. So
way underselling the Vikings here. That was before they drafted Jordan Addison. Clearly, the Vikings should be 11.5, 12.5 now. No, go Vikings. So
these slow 5'11 receivers are always what put teams 4 wins of their total.
Okay. Hear me out though. Justin Jefferson, not the biggest or the fastest guy out there. So it's a mold that has worked for the Vikings. Chris Carter, same thing. Now, Randy Moss, of course, very fast and pretty tall. So maybe kind of breaks that mold. But the Vikings have had success with receivers that are not particularly fast, that just are skilled. And I think Jordan Addison, similar to Justin Jefferson, is just a skilled receiver. So I'm excited about that. But Luke Musgrave, I had not heard of him prior to yesterday, so I don't have any strong opinions on Luke Musgrave. I'll just tell you, I'm coming from a best ball perspective. I'm thinking about things in terms of best ball. It sounds like Isaiah's pretty high. Isaiah definitely knows these players better than I do. I don't watch college football, so I'm just responding to things that I read on Twitter, videos that I watch prior to the draft. So I don't know much about Luke Musgrave, but as far as landing spots go, definitely a pretty solid landing spot for him. Like I think, especially like inexperienced quarterbacks are a little bit more likely to target big tight ends. Isaiah, you're raising your hand. Was there a big breaking move or something?
Yeah, I might have to abridge my take a little bit. The Packers just took a wide receiver. They took Jaden Reed from Michigan State.
Ooh.
So even more mouths to feed in that offense now. I'm still pretty high on Luke Musgrave generally, but the fact they just invested pretty decent day 2 draft capital in a wide receiver, that makes that offense a lot more interesting here. Jaden Reed is another solid prospect. He wasn't going super high in drafts. He is at an ADP of 238. So he's going at the end of drafts, very late round guy. Along with Christian Watson, I think that offense got a lot more explosive. I think this primarily should help Jordan Love's ADP at this point, considering he's got 2 weapons in the second round.
Yeah, Jaden Reed, definitely some buzz. I know JJ Zacharyson, I think, was touting him a little bit. I don't get going Reed over guys like Jalen Hyatt, over guys like Marvin Mims. Like, I love Mims, but Jaden Reed, if you were drafting him in the big board Superflex or the big board and underdog, you're probably getting pretty unique right away because he was not a guy flying off the board. Like Tyler Scott was getting drafted. These other guys who have not been picked so far. Cedric Tillman, another guy that I was definitely tacking onto a lot of drafts, not going so far. So Jaden Reed going to make some teams unique. And Neil, again, the teams get stronger here going in the NFC North, going against the Vikings. So how are you feeling about these 2 weapons that you probably, again, did not know much about yesterday?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about them. The Vikings are just so head and shoulders above every other team in the NFC North that it's not a huge concern for me here. And Jaden Reed, not somebody who I think has been, doesn't have incredible ADPs. Like I don't think he's an extremely highly touted wide receiver, at least in terms of where was he even drafted? Let's see if we can find Jaden Reed on here.
38.2, so basically not drafted, it looks like.
Yeah, so basically not drafted. I missed him on here, 238.2. Yeah, Jaden Reed. So it's not like he's been profiling as some world-beating receiver here. So it doesn't scare me. We got the better receiver in Jordan Addison. I'm not worried about it.
It's definitely interesting draft capital for Jaden Reed. And, I would say tacking him onto those Packers stacks going to look pretty appealing as well, because you are getting him for cheaper than Romeo Doubs to start for sure. Christian Watson is going up pretty high in drafts. But I definitely believe in that Packers stack. I think there's potential for Jordan Love, just having not played for a few years, being a mobile quarterback and having some brief flashes. That's obviously not a big sample size of what he did, but definitely some interesting weapons for the Packers. One thing we didn't talk about, Jonathan Mingo. So Jonathan Mingo is kind of a name that I know the underdog guys, Hayden and Josh, had talked a good amount. A guy who's built like AJ Brown, but numerically in terms of what he did on the field, really nothing that stands out as kind of impressive to me. I guess a 23.5% avoided tackle rate looks pretty good for Mingo, but Mingo now part of this Panther stack. And Isaiah, are you feeling confident about Jonathan Mingo going into this spot? Is, again, a big bodied guy, all the opportunity in the world for him going into Carolina with, to be Bryce Young's safety blanket. But in college, I just didn't see it. I know that some people feel differently.
Yeah, it's a really interesting landing spot for him. I yesterday on the stream talked a bit about Carolina investing in DJ Shark, and I thought that he was a little bit underrated. Shark, obviously being a very athletic, but also still very big-bodied receiver. I kind of would still have Shark slotting in as the X receiver in this offense, especially given what we've heard from their coaching staff in the offseason. Obviously, there's a lot more mouths to feed now because they have both Adam Thielen and Terrace Marshall. So I think this is good for Bryce Young. I think it's hard to break down what their offense looks like before training camp at this point. We don't really know what Shark looks like. We don't know what the role that he is projected to have in that offense is. We don't know how that might displace their new acquisition. So I kind of need to see camp here, but I do think that definitely does help Bryce out a lot.
Neil, how are you feeling about Mingo in the spot where he was getting drafted a little bit in some of these underdog drafts? I am seeing him at
301 or 239. I'm clearly misunderstanding these numbers, but ADP of around 240 here for Jonathan Mingo.
So Mingo basically undrafted, even more so than some of the guys we've just talked about here. But a big-bodied guy coming in. Again, some people do like him. I'm kind of taken aback by the fact that he is as large as he is. He's getting targeted downfield a lot, but had a pretty low EPA per target in terms of throws over 20 air yards, 0.414 EPA per target, which for perspective, guys like Jalen Hyatt have a 1.6 EPA per target on deep throws. Matt Landers, another speedster guy who might get drafted at some point, high 1.5 EPA per target. Point being, Neil, I don't think Mingo's that impressive, but the draft capital's there now and a pretty cheap Carolina stack. So is he going to be a core part of what you'll be doing?
I mean, when you've got a tiny quarterback, you got to have big receivers, right? So how big did you say he is, Spags?
I think he's like 6'4". He was, I think, the biggest receiver in this class.
All right. So, and you know, again, young quarterbacks or like inexperienced quarterbacks more likely to target bigger receivers, typically tight ends, but I think big receivers probably qualify as well. So I imagine he's probably going to. Coltrane says he's only 6'1". Is that right? Only 6'1"?
I thought he was bigger. I could be wrong.
Isaiah,
in my mind, he's
in?
like the largest man in the world. He's like Darnell Washington size.
Yeah, I'm looking at the athletics big board. It looks like he is around 6'1", 6'2"-ish.
Okay, so there, but he's anyway, he's pure muscle though. So he looks like probably a larger man. I was trying to go to RAS while we were talking, but
okay,
scratching for me.
220 pounds though, so that is pretty massive. That might be one of the heaviest wide receivers in the class for sure.
Yeah, definitely a difference between him and like Quentin Johnson, who's kind of built a little more NBA player in terms of his length and width.
So it's interesting. So where do you think he slots in here now for Carolina? Like they've got Adam Thielen, who I don't think is any good these days. Maybe he'll come back. He'll surprise us with a bounce back here. Terrace Marshall, somebody that I have had some interest in. And then who is the third? Is it DJ Chark?
Wow. Oh, wait. The interesting pick just happened. Zach Charbonnet to the Seahawks.
Charbonnet. Yeah.
Ooh,
how does that affect that backfield? I don't know. That's interesting.
That is awful for Kenneth Walker. I think
it is.
Because Charbonnet is a true bell cow back, and also he can pass protect. Like he was actually very good, both pass protecting and generating value out of the pass game at UCLA. I'm pulling up his numbers real fast here, but yeah, 0.221 EPA per target. Actually a very high 46% avoided tackle rate when he was catching a pass as well. So that was a thing, Neil, that last year, Kenneth Walker, part of the reason he didn't hit that apex value was him not catching passes and being subbed out for the Travis Homers, the DJ Dallases of the world. So I think that Kenneth Walker should be one of the biggest followers, but relative to current ADPs.
Absolutely. Yeah, that does not help him one bit. And where was he going? Kenneth Walker, I feel like he was a pretty early pick here.
He was going in that Saquon range.
Was he really that high? Ooh.
Yeah. 22.5 ADP is what I'm saying.
Yep, 22.5. Yeah, I think he's going to drop here. I mean, he's clearly going to drop here. I don't even need to speculate. We know that he's going to drop from 22.5.
Wow.
How far? I don't know. What do you think? Maybe 5th round or so? What do you think, Spags?
He's got to go, I think, Najee range at best would be my thought. Najee Harris, a 42.4 ADP, maybe behind him a little bit more. But to me, this feels like this has to be a timeshare. Like this has to be a very serious timeshare, at least equivalent to what he was doing with Rashad Penny in the beginning of the year. They didn't have a ton of overlap, but there still was some. So I think he's got to fall to the 50 range would be my thought.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds about right. Maybe even lower. Like that's gonna hurt him quite a bit. I don't think I have much Kenneth Walker, thankfully, so it doesn't kill me all that much. But absolutely, if you have a lot of Kenneth Walker exposure, you're not feeling good about that pick for the Seahawks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would also watch out too. Damian Pierce, I feel like, is another guy that's just lurking around. Obviously, they signed Singletary, but which could be just as bad as well. But these rookie running backs, again, the assumption of value, I think, was something Justin Herzig, who does stuff for ETR, tweeted, of course, the best ball savant as well, but talked about like the biggest failing that people have. Like, I'll never forget when I drafted Mike Davis heavily a couple years ago on the assumption he was going to be the bell cow back, and then he ends up being like a non-factor after he had that one good year in Carolina.
Right.
And I think anytime you are drafting guys, assuming they're going to have value, even if they are young guys like Walker, you got to sometimes assume that's not going to be the case. Isaiah, how about for you here? I guess, would you have a strong lean towards a lower ADP Charbonnet or a higher ADP Kenneth Walker?
I mean, the obvious corollary here is how much does this affect Charbonnet? He was at 98 ADP. I mean, you can say that the landing spot certainly doesn't help either of them. Do I lean toward Charbonnet because of his skill set? No. I still think that Walker is the proven back. I think that he'll get the first opportunities in the receiving game. So, I mean, I'm not buying either of them at their current ADP. I think that Charbonnet might be the better buy low, especially for best ball, should anything happen to Walker, assuming his ADP completely bottoms out. But it'll be interesting to see where exactly these guys are going later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say to me, this feels like the Bijan Robinson Algier thing yesterday, where you had a good running back, and now I think the value of both guys just comes down because they now have a very viable pivot to go the other way. And still Algier should go a lot lower than he's going. Around the 100 spot is where he's been going. But I think in this spot too, Charbonnet going in a similar range. I think both Charbonnet and Algier should probably be in like the 125 to 150 range now. Neil, does that feel like too big of an overreaction, given that they can still win jobs theoretically, or at least be valuable handcuffs?
You say the 125 to 150 range?
Yeah, I think so for both Charbonnet and for Algier.
Yeah, probably. Like they're both. It's definitely timeshare spots now. I'm trying to think. Algier, like I would probably say Charbonnet ahead of Algier at this point, even with how good Algier was. Like clearly the Falcons didn't pick Bijan Robinson to not use him. So I would imagine Algier drops more than Charbonnet. So I think they kind of flip each other. It had been Algier going ahead of Charbonnet. I would imagine Charbonnet drops, but not quite as much as Algier. Yeah, Algier was going pick 90. Charbonnet was going pick 98. So I think that at this point we're going to see Charbonnet drop down to maybe pick 130 and Algier down to around pick 150. So yeah, I think you're about right with that range. I think spot on.
I'd say, does that feel like too much of a jump for you, given that you are kind of caping a little bit here for Kenneth Walker?
I mean, so 150 for Algier feels about right. For Charbonnet 125, that's the same range as Kenny Gainwell. I think that Charbonnet has enough upside. Same with Kenneth Walker, where I'm still comfortable not like I don't think their ADP will bottom out all that much, but it should obviously go down. I'm still probably a little higher on both of them, especially Charbonnet than that. But Algier, I think, is completely tanked. I do not think there's much value in him aside from being a handcuff at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Atlanta's going to do, and I know they gave some quotes, and we know head coach quotes mean absolutely nothing relative to the grand scheme, but talking about wanting to pass more, I think they're a team that's going to run the ball 35 times a game, no matter what kind of the ecosystem is. And to me, that feels like 20 to Bijan, 10 to 15 to Algier, and then the scraps go to Caleb Huntley or Cordell Patterson gimmick plays. So I think there's still room for him to be valuable. And I would say too the same thing for Charbonnet. I just think now their value is that you're going to have big week 17 leverage. And if you're not familiar with best ball, all the prizes, that $3 million going to first place in Best Ball Mania 4, that's paid out in week 17. So even if you are trying to build teams that are good all year round, you want your teams to hit that crescendo for week 17 and give you chances to win with hopefully more unique lineups than your peers. I think Charbonnet and Algier's primary function right now is they're going to be huge leverage against wherever Bijan's getting drafted, wherever guys like Kenneth Walker getting drafted, just because if Walker fails, that could mean Charbonnet goes off. If Bijan fails, that could mean Algier goes off. I think that's the only reason you still draft at this point, Neil, unless you feel differently.
Yeah, no, I think they are largely handcuffs at this point. Algier was so good last year. That's part of the reason the Bijan Robinson pick shocked me. It was like Algier was 4.9 yards per carry last year, and they're gonna go replace him immediately. So if they are running 35 times a game, like you're speculating, Spags, then there's clearly still value there in Algier. If he's getting 15 carries a game, that's plenty valuable in and of itself, and then there's the additional handcuff factor. So is that what am I representing what you said right? It sounded like you think that they're going to rush about 35 times a game, which would be still plenty for Algier in that case.
Yeah, I think there's still, like the contingent kind of value that's going to be the main thing. But I would say too, yeah, if you're getting 10 touches a game in the modern NFL, like that can matter, especially if those 10 touches are, goal line touches. And the one quote they gave today and Arthur Smith gave that I'll choose to listen to a little bit more than him saying he wants to pass more was that he thought Tyler Algier is more like the sledgehammer back. And then Bijan Robinson's going to be more of a graceful back who can run some routes and get out and all that stuff. I think that's where the value is that, you're basically trying to capture for these guys that Jamal Williams kind of upside where you can get touchdowns and then hopefully a little more talent that Jamal has at this stage of the career. But it's definitely an interesting spot. And I think, a lot of running backs can be falling overall to ADP and certainly going to be different ADPs in Best Ball Mania 4 than they had in the big board drafts. Isaiah, I know you've got a bunch of prospects that you've been keeping an eye on. So who else is still out there right now that you think would be excited to talk about here or that we're really looking forward to get drafted, hopefully over the next hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah, so I think the Chiefs just made a move to trade up. I think they traded up with Detroit. I don't know who the Chargers took a defensive lineman, so the Chiefs are on the clock. I think this could be a spot where the Chiefs are going skill position players, and this is a name that you've already talked about, Jalen Hyatt. I've seen mocked to the Chiefs a decent amount. They love to get those speedy receivers. Hyatt obviously has game-breaking speed. He also won the Blitnikoff Award for this season. I'm a Tennessee Volunteers fan. I got to see Jalen Hyatt play it a lot. While I'm a little bit concerned about his overall route tree, it looks like it's not Jalen Hyatt. I don't know. That's the Chargers pick. Never mind. I think that Hyatt would be a really exciting pick to go to a Mahomes-led offense. Again, we know how much the Chiefs love their speedy receivers. I think that's the biggest name that I'm watching fall on the board right now. Has to be Jalen Hyatt.
I would float Marvin Mims being a guy that I still think would kind of make sense too in Kansas City, a smaller guy, but who has played out wide. So there are some kind of Tyreek comps you can make if you want to get there. Cedric Tillman, a bigger bodied guy, over 6 feet, who I think can be also pretty viable there. But we'll see what the Chiefs do because I've not seen the report coming through yet on Twitter. Neil, is there anybody for you who you've kind of been drafting a little bit in the early drafts? And we have some questions in the chat too that we can hit in a second. But is there anybody that you're particularly enthusiastic to see go?
Ooh. I don't know if there is. I'm trying to think if there is. I mean, I kind of want to see where Hooker ends up. Hayden Hooker, I think, it's an interesting just place to see where he ends up. If he ends up somewhere where he can be a starter, I don't. It's probably unlikely at this point, but I'm interested to see where. Hendon Hooker, right? Hendon Hooker, where he ends up. I'm trying to think who else we're still waiting on here in terms of we've got all the big tight ends off the board. Definitely Jalen Hyatt, as you mentioned.
We still have Darnell Washington floating around to tight end. I guess some medical red flags from some teams are knocking him down.
I thought that he had gone in round 1. Okay, so we've still waiting on Darnell Washington. That'll be an interesting one.
I will say we no longer have Rashee Rice floating around because he, at wide receiver, went to the Chiefs.
Wow. Okay. So that's a key one because he is not like, I know people got burned last year pretty bad by Sky Moore and just, falling for, again, a really cool name. Like I get it. He's named after the vodka. It looks great. But I think that to me, Rashee Rice, a guy that did not play at a high level in college, did play for SMU. So he didn't play great competition, but he earned targets like an MF for 38% targets per route run, 0.22 EPA per target, which is not that great, but 113 yards per game. So absolutely some explosiveness there. An okay avoided tackle rate, 21%, but definitely a guy, Isaiah, who's earned some targets at a lower level. Now he's going to the Chiefs, who have shown kind of an interest perhaps in taking some of these guys from smaller schools and giving them a shot because they know they could plug anybody into this offense. Big surprise that he's going ahead of those guys like Hyatt, who you talked about, but how are you feeling about Rashee Rice?
I think that's a very high upside pick. I saw that he was, my bad. My lamp just started flickering because I touched my remote. I saw that he was mocked to the Chiefs in the first in a couple of spots. So I'm not really surprised to see him land here. I am surprised to see the Chiefs get aggressive and trade up for him. I think it's a good landing spot, mostly for dynasty leagues. I do not know how this affects best ball competition. I mean, we obviously saw Sky Moore last year. We know McCole Hardman's gone. So that does create a little bit of a gap, but now there's clear competition for who fills that role in Kansas City. So I think it makes things a lot more interesting. I don't know who ends up taking the rollover, though.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because MVS also still a cut candidate because they could save some money on the cap by cutting him after the draft. So definitely a possibility. Neil, how are you feeling about Rashee Rice? And I know, just the DFS logic, this is a guy who's going to be in a Chiefs offense that we know is going to be one of the highest scoring, or we're going to assume everybody being healthy and all that. And you expect some regression from Travis Kelce with him getting older and then maybe wanting to preserve that. Are you willing to take a stab on Rashee Rice just because of the pedigree and where he's going?
Absolutely. I mean, the Chiefs, you can't think of a much better landing spot for a receiver than with the Chiefs. So definitely going to give me some interest in Rashee Rice. Who I'm trying to remember who they just signed. There was some receiver that the Chiefs just signed in the offseason, some veteran receiver, and I can't remember
Richie
who it
James?
is. Was it Reggie? Maybe it was Reggie James. Yeah, who I started then drafting a lot in best ball. I was like, I don't understand why people are not drafting Richie James. That is exactly what it is. Richie James. I've been started drafting a lot in best ball because I'm like, any receiver on the Chiefs, if they're being drafted in like the final rounds in best ball, clearly they have the upside for some spike weeks. We saw it last year. Like people were way overdrafting the Chiefs last year. Like clearly Sky Moore, one of the bigger busts in best ball last year. MVS, same story. But like if you're drafting receivers for the Chiefs in the later rounds, you're going to find somebody's going to be a gem, I'm sure. So Rashee Rice, definitely, if you can get him in those later rounds, I imagine he's going to move up the board a little bit here now that he's gone to the Chiefs. I think that's definitely a solid pick. And are you in the YouTube chat at all, Spags?
Yeah, I'm seeing. Yeah, I have it on the StreamYard.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Yeah, because you see that.
Yeah, I was going to pull
people
this one
excited
up.
to see you.
Oh, actually, I can't pull it. Never mind. But can you pull up? Well, I guess we could just say it. NF42 asked, how many hours are we from BBM dropping? BBM 4 comes out tomorrow, is what the reports are on the street. So after the draft concludes, I think it'll be a few hours. I know my pal Pete was doing a stream at 9 p.m. and his understanding, as somebody who has that insider knowledge over there, is that it'll be good to go by 9 p.m. So I would say somewhere 5
9
to 9
p.m. tomorrow night.
Yeah. So you're going to be there on day one, Neil? You're going to be locked in?
Oh, I'm probably going to start with some slow drafts. I'll probably do at least one fast draft tomorrow just because I'm excited about it. But I actually do a lot more slow drafts than most people. I know everybody hates doing slow drafts, but I just do several at a time and it's very fun. So yeah, I'll definitely be jumping into BBM 4 immediately. I'm not going to jam in 150 right away because I like to spread it out throughout the summer. Things change, the landscape changes, and I think you can find different advantages throughout the time. So I want to have a diverse portfolio in that sense. But I'll definitely get started tomorrow.
Isaiah, are you planning on waiting in heavy, or are you gonna time it out a little bit better?
I think I'm gonna stagger. I haven't done best ball before actually. I'm looking to get into it this year. I think it should be a lot of fun. But I definitely think I need to dip my toes in first before I overcommit a little bit too much. So I might try 1 or 2 out tomorrow, and then we'll see what's up after that.
There's a lot of great articles floating around out there too that I'll just highlight if you are new to best ball. Obviously, Isaiah is a pretty sharp guy if you've seen from some of his betting videos. But in general, for all the guys out there, if you are new to best ball, it's a great time to get in there. Again, use that promo code Stochastic to double your deposit up to $100. Besides that, though, again, a huge prize pool up there. And what you're doing if you draft right now in Underdog is you're going to forfeit some of the knowledge you're going to have throughout the course of the entire offseason, where you'll know guys' roles, you'll know how they did in preseason, you'll know how they did, in actual camp reports, all the athletic stuff that we hear about. Where you can get some value right now is drafting these guys on the assumption of where they're going to go. So Rashee Rice, he's going basically undrafted. If you draft him now, get him in a cheap ADP, you're going to have that ADP pay off basically by the time that August comes around. And we hear that Rashee Rice is basically the wide receiver one for the Kansas City Chiefs or something like that. So that's the advantage, Neil, that I see about drafting early is you have a chance to build super teams. And certainly there's merits, I think, to drafting the entire draft season. But for me, I know I'll put a few in early, and then you kind of want to keep a level pace until we get to about September.
I mean, we have both of the Millie Maker winners last year, or at least were there 3 total, drafted on, I think, July 18th. So right in the middle of that bell curve. So a lot of people advocate for the bell curve, draft a lot early, draft a lot late. But I think throughout the summer, information is changing. You can find throughout. I mean, we had last year, like Dameon Pierce, his ADP moved up like 80 spots. So if you were doing it early, you were getting Dameon Pierce to like pick 160 or something. Later on, you had to, reach for him at like pick 80. So things change. That's part of the reason I like to do it just throughout the summer, is just like things are changing at all times. So like people have said that there's more of an advantage. And I think Eric Beinfor I had on my high stakes podcast said that he likes, he thinks of it as a barbell. He drafts more so at the beginning and at the end. I don't want to misquote him. I'm not sure. I don't remember if that's what Eric said exactly, but that's what a lot of people say. But I think that there's like throughout the summer, there's new information coming. So I think that I don't know that I totally believe in the barbell. I kind of like the doing it throughout the summer, but maybe I'm wrong. It's also for me part of it because I'm doing 150. It's like, if I'm going to get 150 in, it's easier if I'm doing it throughout the summer.
Yeah, and there's also all the puppy drafts too. I know for me that because I did max out the BBM last year and then also tried to max out or get as close as you can without driving yourself insane, all the puppies. And basically what I would say is if you are trying to max these tournaments out, like Neil is, like I'll be doing, hopefully Isaiah, we can turn into a degenerate too. He'll be in the best ball lobbies all hours of the day too. But basically you need to draft now, I think, to get that 150 good. And I think too, to give yourself different looks because these are going to be different pockets of time for the ADPs. ADP, of course, the market generated price is going to be the main thing you should use. It's the equivalent of a projection if you're playing more DFS stuff. It's really important to get into these windows now because information is going to come out. And if you're good on player takes, like, Neil's going to learn about all these guys as fast as humanly possible. If you can kind of identify these guys like immediately, you're going to be in a good spot if you draft Rashee Rice. People are like, oh, I don't know who this guy is, because they're going to know by the time July rolls around.
Yeah, absolutely. People are getting more and more information throughout the summer. So the earlier you can get in without much information, the better you can do. I'm now thinking about, like, how does this pick of Rashee Rice affect other Chiefs? I'm starting to look at, like, Kadarius Toney at 72. I mean, he's always been kind of volatile, so it's a big risk you're taking there anyway. Probably doesn't affect Kadarius Toney as much, but like Sky Moore, where has Sky Moore been going?
It feels like it flattens them all out. Isaiah, how are you feeling about it? Because I know, certainly some guys with different pedigrees coming into this team. Kadarius Toney, a guy who actually played in the SEC and has had some real ceiling spots where we haven't seen that from Sky Moore yet. Obviously, we haven't seen it from Rashee Rice yet. Who are you favoring in that Kansas City wide receiver core?
I don't think there's a right answer here. I think the only correct answer right now is Travis Kelce, purely because we've seen him have the volume, especially in the red zone. I think with all this change in Kansas City, especially if you're right that MVS does end up getting cut, I think that at least early in the year, Mahomes doesn't have a lot of familiar faces to work with. I think that means he favors Kelce. And while you're right to flag, Kelsey's getting older, there might be some age-based regression at some point. At least early in the year, I think Kelce is probably the likeliest of any receiver in this Kansas City offense to have a spike week. Whether that holds true moving forward, I don't know. But I think at least early in the year, Kelce has to be the favorite to be the leading option in this Kansas City offense.
Yep. I'm with you on that. I think, even with the age stuff, you got to keep going until the wheels fall off. Unfortunately, you don't want to draft 30% Kelce. I guess, Neil, how do you manage the exposures? Because I think that's another question too. We're talking about some of the timings and all that. Are you a guy that does try to keep it close to that 8 point whatever percent where you're kind of taking advantage of the ADP windows, or are you trying to double up? Are you playing more exploitatively? Because I think Brian Hooper, of course, has been a lot in the stochastic channel, has made some really good points about that stuff. So how are you playing in terms of your exposures?
So I typically end up pretty flat. So like I'm not like 8%. Like I'm definitely not trying to get to 8% of everybody, but like I think my most exposed players last year were like 30% or something I had of some players. So relatively flat. Like some people are going to end up with, I know Felix, who won the DraftKings contest a couple years ago, had like 90% Najee Harris or something ridiculous like that. There are some people who take huge stands, and I think that's a fine way to approach it. But for me, I'm trying to draft for structure typically in these drafts. So I'm like, I take what comes to me. I'm not trying to force in any players. I'm not reaching far ahead of ADP for that many players, at least in the early rounds. I will in the later rounds, but in the first like 100 picks or so, I'm rarely reaching to get to like way above the field on any one player. So for me, I'm typically a little bit more flat, and then I'm just trying to make sure that I'm stacking my quarterbacks, making sure the correlations make sense for me. But for me, I'm not really trying to play as exploitatively in best ball, in part because I think that there are a lot more bad best ball drafters than there are like DFS at this point. So like, I don't need to be jamming in plays, playing exploitatively. I can just assume that other people are going to draft completely uncorrelated lineups. And if they make it to the playoff rounds, they're probably not going to compete well in those playoff rounds. Could be wrong. I was surprised actually in the final how many completely uncorrelated, in my opinion, bad lineups made it to the final, but I don't think they really had a chance to win the final at that point. So I'm going to continue just probably playing flatter exposure. Of course, I think I had like 54% or something ridiculous of what's his name? Not Daryl. Yeah, Daryl Williams. When he was the backup running back, the CEH's rookie year. CEH's rookie year.
Okay, not last year. I was like, last year that would not have gone well.
It didn't go well the year. So I drafted him. He didn't do shit the year I had him, Daryl Williams. The next year he was fired. He was great the following year. He like started several games, was looking really good. But the year I had him, he was a big disappointment. But typically I'm a little bit more balanced.
NF42 asking, can we access the ADP PDF somehow? I think you could actually just get it on Underdog yourself. When you can't right now, but when they reopen BBM4, you can pull the ADPs out of the ranking tool. Unless, Neil, it's not anywhere on the stochastic site, is there?
No, it was posted in the Underdog Discord is where you can find this.
Yeah, so go to the Underdog Discord, check it out. You should be, be in the mix there anyway if you are especially trying to be serious about best ball. And to talk quickly about the exposure stuff, like I'm mostly with you, Neil. Like I don't think the 50% shares, like I know Felix crushed in the DK Millie Maker 2 years ago doing that, and then he went Najee Harris heavy again the year after, and it's like that did not work out that well. I think to me it's more about, I could say like some of the players I took stands on last year were Kyle Pitts. I had like 25% of. I had 25% of Darren Waller, and I had 25% of Trey Lance, and then I had 25% of Tyler Algier. And I consider myself like pretty on the ball because I'm doing content from January through December for football stuff. And I think, if you're playing very exploitatively, you're going to leave yourself holding some bad bags. So 8%, everybody's going to have 8% of every player. That's just sort of how the tournament structure works. But in general, I would say cap yourself at 25% max and ideally even 16%. Like getting 2x the field, Neil, in DFS, you'd feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, you do feel pretty good about that. I mean, I don't set any kind of hard rules like that. It's just kind of the way I'd say in general, my best advice if you are new to best ball is to let it come to you. Like let the picks come to you. If there are players that you like better than the field, and you start getting to like 100%, you're getting through you're like 30 drafts and you have 100% of one player, maybe reconsider at that point. Maybe think about, okay, why? What are the risks here? Why is nobody else? Why am I getting him in every draft? You look like you. What happens, Spags? What happened?
So interesting pick at tight end. So this is a guy had no buzz at all, but I had identified him as looking really good in the numbers that I look at. Luke Schoonmaker goes to the Cowboys. This is a bad one for Jake Ferguson, who was pretty good last year. I think it was actually better than Dalton Schultz in terms of the DVOA, of course, Football Outsiders number, my employer during the days, but also EPA numbers for Sports Info Solutions. Like Schumacher was legit good. I'm pulling up his numbers right now. 0.441 EPA per target, 29% target per route run rate, was also pretty good in the red zone, had a 0.388 EPA per target in the red zone. So you're lighting up too, Isaiah. Schumacher to me is a real steal here, and I'm kind of surprised he's going this early.
Actually, I think this might be good for Jake Ferguson relative to what we know Dallas wanted to do to get another bigger name tight end like Kincaid or Michael Mayer. I think that Jake Ferguson, we all know how shaky rookie tight ends are, right? So I wouldn't be shocked if at least at the start of the season, given that there's no more Dalton Schultz in this offense, if Ferguson starts off as the starter and has a decent sized role to work with here. Obviously, they have Brandon Cooks in the offense now still. I think that out of all the tight ends that Dallas could have taken, we knew that they were going to take one. This one is probably one of the least bad for Jake Ferguson. It's certainly not good, but it could have been a lot worse for him here.
Are you surprised, like I am, that Darnell Washington's still not going? There were some red flags raised in his medical. He's a big-bodied guy, so I guess maybe some concern he can hold up over the course of a season. But a pass-blocking beast, a run-blocking beast, a guy who can also catch some balls. Like, I like Schoonmaker, but I don't think he should have gone over Darnell Washington.
Yeah, this Darnell Washington fall is really interesting to me. I think that obviously there must be some injury concerns, because if you have a sixth offensive lineman on the field, I think you have a massive advantage in the running game. I think maybe a lot of teams who are more pass-oriented are just a little bit afraid of how much value they're getting out of him as a passer. I wouldn't be shocked if a team with more of a dual-threat quarterback ends up committing to him just because they know what upside he offers in the rushing game. So that's kind of what I'm looking for here, is I think Washington may fall to a team like Chicago, who has a mobile quarterback, where they were getting a little bit more value out of a tight end like Darnell Washington than a team like Dallas.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Neil, how are you feeling about Schoonmaker here? Because it seems like he didn't even have an ADP on Underdog from what I'm seeing. I'm
trying to find him, and I can't. Yeah. So you seem to be right.
I drafted him a few times, I know that, but I guess not enough to give him an ADP.
Did you really? You drafted him, man. So he's an offensive weapon. He's not just a blocker. He's actually a receiving tight end.
No, he definitely is a guy that could do a little bit of everything. He's 6'6", so like he's definitely going to be a blocker, and he should be. But he's basically, a similar player to Luke Musgrave. Musgrave a little better downfield. I think. Isaiah, correct me if you feel like I'm wrong. But I think
I'm waiting for chat to tell me he's actually 5'9".
He's 5'9", very portly. Yeah. could be hosting a YouTube stream against us right now. No, I think it's an interesting pick. I'm just shocked that it's not Darnell Washington personally.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting that this guy who went undrafted in best ball in the big board, at least. Did you play the big board draft, Spags? So maybe could that?
So I have 3.4% of him in the big board, okay. So which is more than the public, I think.
So I don't think that I did not play the big board. I played what were the pre-draft contests that I did?
Superflex?
I didn't do any Superflex. I just did. Hang on,
because it was big board, then big board Superflex were the flagship.
I didn't. Oh, was it? Okay, hang on. Where do I find this? Results, drafts, completed, pre-draft best ball. Oh, I did do the big board. Oh, yeah. What am I talking about? It was the big board. Okay.
So you just did Superflex. You don't like Superflex?
I just don't know Superflex. Like I don't know. Like I'm sure I could have figured out how to play Superflex, but I just never got into it. I like the standard kind of way of playing best ball. So it was also kind of a timing thing. I've been super busy lately, so like I think the Superflex stuff was during a period where I just didn't really have time to hammer in best ball draft. So just never got. I actually was planning on joining some, but never got around to it. So
It's a
sadly was
tough
not able to.
format. Like I know the sniping is always a thing, and that's something to be aware of too. Like Neil was talking about earlier, stacking is the most important thing you can do in best ball. Both stacking your quarterback with pass catchers or even a running back more than you would normally in DFS, but also game stacking for week 17. So you hopefully get these players correlated, like the Best Ball Mania 3 winner Pat Carrain did with his stacks of basically, I think it was the Miami and New England game, and then also Carolina and Tampa Bay. So that's sort of one of the things you should know if you are new to best ball. But yeah, I think with the big board drafts, Neil, I did 59 on the big board and 44 Superflex, and I could tell you I got like every stack sniped in the Superflex one, where I don't even know that I completed like complete stacks more than 10% of my drafts. It was awful. Like I hate Superflex drafts.
And Superflex is like you generally you're picking quarterbacks early, right? Like you're picking multiple quarterbacks early on. So it's your so like for regular drafts, I often don't draft a quarterback until I have one of their pass catchers. A lot of the time, not always. Sometimes you can't make that choice. Like Lamar Jackson or like Justin Fields, you kind of have to pick the quarterback before the pass catching options. Maybe not Lamar. I guess you could pick Mark Andrews before him, but at least Justin Fields. Like you're not taking any Chicago receiver before Justin Fields. So sometimes you can't do it. But in general, I wait for the quarterback until I have one of their pass catching options. Clearly not an option in the Superflex format, right, Spags?
Yeah, you kind of have to build the inverse way, which I agree is a little bit less ideal. That's also part of why too, like the QBs are going earlier than ever this year in terms of ADP, especially the high end elite ones. And to me, that just really handcuffs you. Like there are some drafts where you can't get Mahomes and Kelsey together, some drafts where you can't get Hurts and AJ Brown together. Like, and it's just not possible. And I think that's kind of a downer way to look at it. But Isaiah, I know there's some defensive players going here as well as some offensive linemen. Anybody who isn't a skill position guy that you want to talk about here, because I actually know you know your things about these guys, and Neil and I do not think.
Yeah, so I think one of the very easy things that to miss on streams like this is talking about skill position players who benefit by a team's failure to choose another skill position player. So I think two big winners early. Number one, James Cook and Damian Harris. The Buffalo Bills just took Osiris Torrance out of Florida, who is an absolute mountain of a man at guard. I think that opens up some running lanes for them. I don't know which of the two running back is going to get more usage, of course, but I think the Osiris Torrance pick definitely adds to their upside. I would not be shocked if James Cook and Damian Harris end up trending up as a result of that pick. The second guy I see as a big winner, we've seen the Buccaneers make two picks so far, and one of them is offensive tackle Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State. Rachaad White, big winner. He has no added competition so far on day two. Obviously, the Buccaneers could make another move to get another running back later on to add to their backfield. But the fact that they have been confident enough in Rachaad White to not add more competition to that backfield, and they've even added an offensive lineman to the trenches, both of those picks, to me, suggest that the early winners of this draft by like the winners by, I don't know, like negatives, because there were no additions to their backfields as competition, have to be Rachaad White and the Buffalo backfield so far.
I'll throw one more in too. How about Irv Smith, who's a new signing to the Bengals? I really thought the Bengals were going to take a Michael Mayer or a Dalton Kincaid, perhaps. And now at this point, we've basically seen every good tight end go besides Washington, who again probably has some medical risks. And the Bengals not taking a tight end, I think, is going to make Irv Smith's role look pretty good. And he was going basically on draft from the big board. He started to come up a little bit in the super flex, but a 239.7 ADP. So people didn't have him. Neil, can you talk yourself into your former Viking, Irv Smith? I know a lot of the Vikings fans do not like him, but he's in prime Hayden Hurst territory. And Hayden Hurst carried some teams for me last year.
Yeah, no, I don't hate it. You're right. It absolutely helps Irv Smith that they have not taken one of these tight ends. A lot of people thought these would be the Bengals would be one of the best landing spots for these talented receiving tight ends. The fact that they haven't taken them, I mean, Irv Smith, I don't hate him. I think that he's a talented enough player. Like I don't think that he was obviously hurt for the Vikings, so that it doesn't help your team if your tight end is hurt. But ultimately they got TJ Hawkinson, so he was expendable. Yeah, I think that you're right. Absolutely helps Irv Smith that they have not gone out and gotten another tight end. We also have like Tony Pollard. I thought the Cowboys might go out and get another running back. I feel like he's benefits a little bit by the lack of a running back being drafted by Tony Pollard. That was something I was a little bit concerned about. Like part of the reason we moved him up so much is that Zeke is gone now. Tony Pollard going to be get a lot more work, but we also know that they said throughout last year, like we don't want to be giving him that bell cow workload. Like we're afraid of giving him too much workload. So I was kind of thinking they might go out and get another running back to pair with Tony Pollard, and they haven't done that. So I makes me a little bit more confident that Tony Pollard actually going to get some run here as well.
Speaking of that, they signed Ronald Jones, right? And I think that he's actually, and I got roped in real bad in Kansas City. Like I took too much Ronald Jones. I backed off by the time all the training camp reports are coming out of him not being in the mix. And obviously that ended up being okay. I think if Rojo gets those Zeke touches, he is a guy that should be drafted a lot higher than a 229.9 ADP that he was most recently in the big board. Isaiah, can you talk yourself into another Rojo run, given that the Cowboys, if they don't take a rookie back here, they got to give that ball to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, in best ball, I can. In redraft, I probably can't. In dynasty, it's certainly hard to continue to justify continuing holding on to your shares of him if you get a competitive offer. I'm not excited about Ronald Jones for sure, but I mean, I can see an argument for him. I do think Pollard is the far more explosive, obviously. But if the Cowboys do end up giving those trash carries to somebody, then it could very well end up being Ronald Jones. So.
And Neil, would you agree with me that Rojo, with him being a guy that admittedly has not shown up and again barely played last year, he could be better than Zeke, right? If you gave him Zeke touches, because Zeke was not very good.
Yeah, I want to say I'm going to leave him for Pat Kerrane, but I don't know. You're kind of talking me into him. Maybe I will draft some Rojo.
Anytime you see those big, and I'll say this to everybody who's watching as well, but like anytime you see those big ADP discrepancies, like this is part of why I ended up with so much Ramondre Stevenson last year was I saw Damian Harris was there. Ramondre was 30 picks behind. Same thing with Kenneth Walker and Rashad Penny. I took a lot of Kenneth Walker because I just didn't think it was right that the ADPs were that far off. You can sometimes really luck box these guys and build that super team we were talking about earlier, where if there were training camp reports that Rojo is working with the first team, like he's probably not going to be doing that all the time. They paid Tony Pollard for a reason, but if he's working in with them, like that means he's probably firmly in a committee, and he shouldn't be going for free at that point in a Cowboys offense that we know is going to want to establish it with bringing in Brian Schottenheimer and all the quotes that McCarthy's given so far. So I would just say, these are the kind of things that I've learned to not have as blind spots in best ball and not to write a guy off because of what he did in the past. And I was as burned as anybody with Rojo last year in Kansas City, but we know Dallas and what they'll do. And boy, if they don't draft a running back here, Rojo is going to be, I think, prime sneaky territory.
All right. Interesting note here. The Broncos are now on the clock for the first time in this draft.
Ooh. Oh, also another tight end Brenton Strange going to Jacksonville, which Brenton Strange graded out well for me, but I did not see second round capital coming his way. Isaiah, are you surprised to see him go? Again, another guy surprising to see out of Darnell Washington.
Yeah, let me pull up. So I've been a big follower of Dane Brugler over the years. I want to see where he has him on his tight end board. He has Strange at, oh man, where does he have Strange? Oh, he has him at 8. So I guess this makes sense as far as a landing spot for him. Like after all the other tight ends have gone, other than Washington or Tucker Kraft, not super shocking. I will say that there's a 3rd to 4th round grade on him on Dane Brugler's big board. So I guess it is a little surprising to see him go this early, especially when Washington and Tucker Kraft are still on the board. So definitely probably a bit of a reach for Jacksonville. I don't know how this affects Evan Engram, who I guess is more of a slot guy at this point in his career, but an interesting move nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely Brenton Strange jumps out. The advanced analytics was not running a ton of routes per game, only 15 routes per game, a low target per route run rate, just 19% for him, which would actually be, I think, worst in the class, not including Tucker Kraft, but I think Tucker Kraft had a higher one. I should have his numbers here, but a 0.583 EPA per target, 22% avoided tackle rate. And he was actually very good playing out of the slot, had a 0.865 EPA running out per target, running out of the slot. So I think Brenton Strange is actually kind of interesting here with Engram. I think, not the longest of deals for Jacksonville. He's not going to be there forever. I don't mind him being a pick now. And he, to me, Neil, I think it'd be a guy you draft because people love that Jacksonville offense and he's a big bodied guy who can get out there. And I feel like you can't leave any stone unturned in terms of trying to fill that tight end 3 spot if you are going 3 tight ends.
Yeah, absolutely. If he's your last round pick, I don't see any reason not to go there. I am very concerned about Evan Engram, though. I mean, ADP of, what does that say, 85 or something for Evan Engram? We have ADP. Yeah, 85.5 for Evan Engram. So do you think that drops Spags? I feel like it has to. If they have this new rookie tight end that they're going to be working in, do you think it drops much?
He can go to the 90s, I think, probably not more than that, because he did help advance a lot of teams last year, and I think people will certainly hold that torch. Like, he's one of very few tight ends who showed that elite ceiling that can carry you through. So I think that 85.5 is a little bit too rich, but if you gave me Ingram at 100, I'd still be okay taking him there, just because, I believe in Jacksonville's offense, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're on the topic of Ingram. So with this news, do you take Ingram before or do you take him after the next set on the board, David Njoku?
Ooh.
Ooh.
What do you think, Neil?
I'm still taking Ingram ahead of Njoku. I think he had such good chemistry with Trevor last year. Like the chemistry towards the end of the year in particular, like they were just coming on so strong. They look so good together that I was really big on taking Evan Ingram. I have been up to this point. I've liked Evan Ingram quite a bit. So I still think that I prefer Ingram to David Njoku, but definitely a good question. I'm probably underrated David Njoku a little bit because he got so much steam last year and then did nothing. So I'm probably like a little bit biased by the fact that he was not good last year. It's a good question. What do you think, Spags?
I think they're pretty close. I think that's actually a very good question by Isaiah there. So I would say I would still favor Ingram. Here's the thing: is I think Cleveland's going to be pretty good next year. Like, I think that Sean Watson having another year. I still love Nick Chubb. I like the idea of Nick Chubb either getting a little bit more work or you're working Jerome Ford. And I don't think you're losing a whole lot off of Kareem Hunt being gone. But I just think another year to kind of congeal there will be good for him. So. But Jacksonville, it's hard to imagine them not winning the AFC South. So I think you still put Ingram ahead because there's going to be more points scored, most likely. But if you are like me and a believer in Cleveland, I think Watson's a little bit too cheap. I think Amari Cooper is so undervalued by the fantasy community just because people think he's older than he is and he's not even 30 yet. So I think that if you want to buy in on Cleveland, I don't hate it, but I think the public will certainly favor Ingram by a little bit.
You see, Marvin Mims went to the Broncos.
Wow. Okay. That is a great pick by them. I like Mims a lot, Isaiah. How do you feel about Mims?
I think the biggest thing that jumped out to me is the fact that Denver traded up to get him. I think that is a great sign, especially in dynasty leagues, that Mims is at least going to stick around for a little while. Denver's wide receiver core obviously has three good options going into this season in Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick. I think this shakes things up considerably. I don't know what this means for Patrick. I don't know if this means that Denver is planning to move on from Jeudy. I know that there were a lot of trade talks involving him at some point during the season. It's certainly a good pick for them. I love Mims' upside. I just don't know how I'm going to handicap how their offense looks like moving forward, especially early in the season when they have so many mouths to feed now.
Who do you think, Isaiah, is the most likely to get traded from Denver? Because you mentioned Jeudy. I know Sutton was also floating around in trades, but they couldn't find the right price tag for him. If you had to rank those guys, because it does feel like going in with Mims, with Patrick, with Sutton, with Jeudy is a little bit too much for especially a Sean Payton offense. Which of those guys would you think would be most likely to move?
Maybe Jeudy. Let me just look at Mims' profile. Yeah, I think Mims is probably more of a Z type receiver, which I know Jeudy has been working a decent amount out of the slot, but you for sure have Sutton at your X. So Jeudy, I mean, maybe you have Tim Patrick at the Z. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to break down. I think that the best return you're going to get is going to be out of Jerry Jeudy for sure. So if I had to say who I think the Broncos would be likely to trade, it's probably Jerry Jeudy. Does that mean I think they will trade him? I don't know. Probably not, actually. But we'll see.
Mims size-wise, certainly closer to Jeudy, 184 pounds, but did play mostly out wide at Oklahoma, so a .487 EPA per target playing out wide. So theoretically, he could be an improvement on Sutton. He's just not kind of the same big-bodied receiver you're looking for, which does feel like Sean Payton always lands having one of those like 6'3", 6'4" guys who can be that sort of bell cow receiver. But Neil, how are you feeling about the Broncos prospects here? And Marvin Mims, are you willing to draft him as part of a Broncos stack that last year was pretty highly priced and definitely disappointed a lot?
It did, but now they got Sean Payton. Clearly, the change in the coaching staff. I feel pretty good. I think I'm going to go. I'm going to make the same mistake again this year. I'm going to go to some Broncos stacks once again. I do think the change in coaching staff is going to make a huge difference for the Broncos. I'm forgetting what the name of their head coach was last year, but he was no good. I think that we can all agree they went from a very bad coach to a very good coach. So I am in on the Broncos once again this year. It is interesting though, like. I think one of them is probably going to be traded, right? Like they even said Tim Patrick was on the trading block. Like, literally every one of their receivers is on the trading block. So I have to imagine they're going to trade one of their receivers. I think I'm with Isaiah that Jerry Jeudy may be the most likely just because he would get the most value. But yeah, I think Marvin Mims definitely going to be somebody. I'm probably not drafting 4 receivers from the same team. So I'll say that. Like if I've already drafted Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, I'm not going to then go to Marvin Mims, or maybe Mims will go ahead of Tim Patrick at this point. So I'm not going to, if I have Mims, I'm not going to draft Patrick. But I'm definitely, I would be very happy to include Mims in my Broncos stacks at this point. Absolutely.
Yeah, in the most recent ADPs on Underdog, Tim Patrick had a 175.3 ADP. Mims had a 189.9. Neil, I kind of feel like maybe, I guess you could just draw them together and put both guys around 180. Does that feel right to you? Because I don't think Mims should take a big jump to be a wide receiver 4 if we're going to assume Patrick is healthy.
So you're still thinking Tim Patrick, the wide receiver 3, Mims wide receiver 4 here for the Broncos?
There was a lot of Denver local reporter talk about how Patrick was like the reason that everything went so bad last year, where he was so good, such an important receiver, and like might be their best receiver. So they didn't have him, and everything kind of fell apart from there. So I think there's enough of that. It does give me some pause that maybe he's just not recovering the way that they would like. And they're just like, well, fuck, he's an older receiver anyway. We got to get somebody in. But I think relative to just not knowing that, I feel like Mims can come up a little, but I think Patrick's got to go down a little too.
Yeah, and I see people talking in chat about KJ Hamler was brought up. I think he's out like for the year, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know if he's out for the year, but he's just always so hurt. And he's already small anyway. Like, I don't think you can put any stock in him moving forward.
I thought he had like a torn ACL or something. Maybe it wouldn't be for the year, but maybe
he was coming off a previous torn ACL.
Oh yeah.
He's honestly had enough injuries that it's hard to keep track for all.
For sure. Yeah, Hamler was coming off the torn ACL.
Yeah, Nathaniel Hackett. I was trying to remember the name. Nathaniel Hackett, the previous coach.
Yes.
Clearly an upgrade in terms of Broncos offense, going from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton. Yeah, it's tough. It's one of those offenses that it's really tough to make of what to do with these guys. I have to imagine that Mims being the like sexier name, the rookie coming in, people are going to be drafting him higher than Tim Patrick, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe people are in enough on Tim Patrick at this point that they're still going to draft him ahead of Mims. But I do think probably it's going to be at least a bump to Marvin Mims that he was drafted by the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the thing in general, and if you are, again, new to best ball, one of the things to try to aspire to is just that younger players do tend to usurp the older players' roles, especially as the season goes on. And with Patrick coming off of an ACL tear, like, I don't think you should ding Mims right now too much for being behind Patrick. That said, you want to see Mims come into a spot where he's going to play from day one. Like, I think if he went with CJ Stroud, like, I believe a lot in CJ Stroud as a guy who's going to be a pure gunslinger coming in. And I think they could use a kind of downfield guy like Mims. But for the Broncos, it's like, okay, you now have to hope that Mims can earn the role over the course of a year. So maybe his ADP doesn't even come up. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes people just rise his ADPs simply because, oh, I now know what team he's playing for, so it's safe to grab him, even though that's an absolutely terrible way to draft.
That's a really good point. And I feel like I've said for several of the rookies now, I think this is probably going to help his value. He's going to jump in the ranks a little bit. And I think that is because people like they're hesitant with guys until they know the ADP. And then at that point, or until they know the team, sorry. Once they know the team that a player is on, definitely like making it more concrete. Like this is a player who is going to be in this offense. You see the ADPs come up with the exception of guys like Jahmyr Gibbs going to Detroit. I feel like that's one of those rare spots where it's like, okay, probably not jumping Jahmyr Gibbs because he's in a spot where he's going to be splitting with potentially probably not going to be ultimately splitting with 2 other running backs. But like some of these running backs are in spots where they're going to be splitting carries. Maybe the ADP actually drops. But for the most part, once you have that team, I do think we see a jump in ADP a little bit.
Yeah, and go check it out tomorrow. Again, Best Ball Mania 4 coming out tomorrow on Underdog. That's what we're promoting here today. Use the promo code Stochastic to double your deposit up to $100 on there and play. It's really a fun tournament. Even if you only put a few bullets in, you will give yourself a shot to win for sure. But in general, Neil and I will be maxing it out. We're going to, again, Isaiah, we're roping in. He's going to be maxing it out too, simply by force of sheer will. But for all you guys out there, it's honestly a lot of fun to me. It's like, I just think a great way to play and the best part of fantasy football without having to do the work. And of course, please be 18 plus or a little bit older in some of those other states. Isaiah, I'm going to ask you a question here because we got about 40 minutes left on this stream we're going to be doing today. A lot of running backs left out there. Names like Devin Achane, Dwayne McBride, Roshan Johnson, Tank Bigsby, Zach Evans, Sean Tucker, Tyjae Spears, Deuce Vaughn, who is too small to be a pro, but he is out there. He'll get drafted at some point. Evan Hull, who has a Senior Bowl steam, Kendry Miller. How many of these guys do you think are going to go over the course of this next 40 minutes? Because it does feel like a running back run has to be coming at some point.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely going to be a run on these guys at some point. I don't know if it's going to be day 3 or late day 2. You can never tell with running backs. The fact that so many of them have fallen so far suggests to me that it will probably take 1 or 2 teams to commit to one of the guys left on the board to really kick off the run, because there are still a lot of options left after the early guys have gone. I will say that I think there is a pretty solid chance we see this run take place in round 3, just because like there are a ton of guys who I think have a lot of there are more high floor guys than I think there are no floor guys, even though there's not a ton of upside left at this point in the draft. So I think that you can get a really, really solid, maybe 2-down guy or maybe scat back type, especially like for scat back. I know you said that he was a little bit too small, but I mean, he showed a lot of life at what was it, TCU that he played?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him do some serious damage as a scat back.
Interesting. I think could be the pocket. We're going to get running backs coming up because so we have 2 picks for the Eagles coming up. I would prefer they not take a running back as somebody that's got a lot of Rashad Penny bags before he signed with the Eagles. So that's what I'm hoping that holds up. But you do then have the Broncos who maybe could use one. Lions are probably safe. The Rams maybe, Raiders maybe if they don't love Zamir White. Saints with Alvin Kamara suspension coming. Cardinals with James Conner getting towards the end of his contract. Texans I think could still take a running back. Definitely live to see some go in this round. Neil, are there any running backs for you that you have some heavy exposures to so far in terms of the rookie class that you want to see going in this round?
I don't believe so. I didn't really take too many of the rookie running backs later on. I have some exposure to Jahmyr Gibbs, to Bijan Robinson. I think I'm mispronouncing it, Bijan Robinson. I have some exposure to those early, but I think just because I don't know that much about these, and Zach Charbonnet, I have some of those earlier running backs. I don't think I took many flyers on later. Oh, Evan Hull. That's one that he just got a lot of Twitter buzz. So I do actually have a good amount of exposure to Evan Hull. So I'll take it back. I do have one rookie running back that I'd love to see land in a great spot, and that is Evan Hull, just because some of the people I follow on Twitter are really high on him. I guess Tank Dell, somebody actually brought him up in chat as well. Somebody that I think I've drafted a little bit of. I only did 34 of these drafts, so I don't have a ton of any of them. But I would say I'm most excited to see where Tank Dell and Evan Hall go.
Well, Tank Dell is a receiver.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Tank Bigsby.
There's too many Tanks, and particularly none of them are Tank. Like Tank Dell's 5'9", Tank Bigsby's not even that big. It's unfair for them to be nicknamed Tank. Roshan Johnson should be nicknamed Tank. I've said that a million times.
Yeah. As I was saying it, I was thinking, wait, is it Dell? And then I was thinking it might be Bigsby. I couldn't remember what the name was. Yeah, Tank Bigsby. Somebody that I've seen some highlights. He actually looks really good. And then Evan Hull, just somebody I saw getting Twitter buzz. Twitter has never led me astray. So I just have to trust what I see on Twitter.
Isaiah, who's your favorite running back who's left?
Of all the guys left, this is going to be a little bit contrarian. I said he went to TCU. I was wrong. It's Kansas State. I was right that it was the Big 12. I think there is a lot of upside with Deuce Vaughn, especially early in his career. I know that's very controversial because of how small he is, but I mean, remember, Tariq Cohen was a solid asset for 1 to 2 seasons, especially in like PPR, half PPR formats, right? I think that there is some solid upside with a guy like Deuce Vaughn, especially in a high volume passing offense, which is likely where he would end up, where it's hard for me to completely ignore him. There's guys like Dwayne McBride, who obviously found ways to make plays and score touchdowns in college. Chase Brown and Israel Abakanda, I'm probably mispronouncing that terribly, in the Big Ten, carried their respective teams pretty much. But I'm still the most excited about Deuce Vaughn. That is definitely a little contrarian, but he's really interesting player. I think that he fits the Tariq Cohen mold perfectly. And I think there's enough upside with that where I'm a little intrigued.
So I'm going to plant a flag here for Roshan Johnson just because I think there are not a lot of backs in this class or in general, really, like in the NFL these days, but like guys that can move a pile. And Roshan Johnson versus 8-man boxes was an absolute beast at Texas. Obviously, he was also playing behind Bijan, so that's going to be something that knocks him down a little bit. 0.556 EPA per play playing against 8-man boxes. Also a really high 33% avoided tackle rate overall, which is a lot for a guy who's 6'2", 220. So I like Roshan a good amount as a guy who can just get that role, can be a guy who can be sort of the sledgehammer back from day one and maybe can evolve past that role. Isaiah mentioned Dwayne McBride. I would plant a flag for him too. High avoided tackle rate, didn't catch any passes, but really did carry UAB. And again, another guy who dominated against 8-man boxes, which I look for, especially against lesser competition, because it just shows that you can kind of prevail against in adverse situations. People mentioned Izzy Abani Kanda. He's a guy that I know is getting steamed up. I kind of never bought the steam on him, Isaiah. I don't know if you felt that a little bit more, but tested like crazy at his pro day. But I just feel like he was an okay college back. So you might feel a little bit stronger than I do, but I just don't see him as anything more than like just a guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was a very high volume guy in college, and you can raise all sorts of questions about whether the volume that he had to play in college is actually bad, given how much run he has already had at this point in his career. I will say that he was exciting to watch in college. I don't know if I'm planning a 3rd round draft grade on him, but he certainly deserves to get picked. If he falls in the right landing spot, then yeah, maybe I'll target him in best ball. More than likely not. I think that you're right to put your flag on Roshan Johnson. I think there's a ton of upside there. I think there's a ton of upside on Dwayne McBride. And I'm going to keep talking about Deuce Vaughn, even though you don't seem to be too care.
He's
You
too
do
little.
not seem to like him too much.
He's too small, and he's not like Tyjae Spears, who I think is like Tyjae Spears is small, and he's still 5 inches taller than Deuce Vaughn, which I think is just one of those things that gives me the fear of God a little bit. I get it. Like, I think there's Deuce Vaughn, like, what's his best possible comp? Like, it's like Darren Sproles, probably, if he gets lucky. Yeah. So I think it's possible. He just kind of has to land in the right spot. Whereas I do think, like, if you give McBride touches, you give Johnson touches. If you give Tyjae Spears touches, I still think like those will be a little more high value. But Deuce Vaughn did some unique things. I just was surprised, honestly, how little I liked them when I looked at the stats. Like, he only had a 15% avoided tackle rate. And if you're that small, like, he's going to get killed in the NFL.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I haven't looked at the avoided tackle rate stuff. I do think that there is still enough from what I've seen from him do with the combine where I think he's a little bit more shifty than maybe he showed, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Isaiah, let me ask you one more name because David Russell thrown. I know Isaiah's taken off in 4 minutes. He's got to get going, but David Russell says, I like Bryce Ford Wheaton. Is this a name you're familiar with, Isaiah?
Oh, Bryce Ford Wheaton.
Bryce Ford Wheaton.
Actually, so because I have a dynasty league that drafted already, shout out degenerates and sickos for drafting their dynasty league so early. I have heard the name before. I did look at him in the 5th round. I did not take him. I don't know nearly enough to give you an actually well-informed take. I think that he will probably end up getting drafted, especially because of his physical traits toward the end of the draft. I don't think he's someone to touch in best ball this year, but he could have some appeal in dynasty leagues, especially if he goes to the right team.
Yeah, he tested like crazy at the combine too. So like that's I think why part of reason that people are really kind of locked in him a little bit more. But I think guys like A.T. Perry a little more live to produce from day one. It's like I still think production matters. So I don't fall completely in love, and I think that's one of the modern kind of couch watching scouting that people have, where it's like, oh yeah, he ran so fast, he's going to be great. Like that certainly is part of the picture. But if a guy ran really fast and also he produced heavy in the SEC or like at least a Power 5 school. I think that's what I hold in more esteem, but we'll certainly see because there's some guys who I think people like too, like Jonathan Mingo fits that criteria, I guess, in some extent, and I'm not there.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Isaiah, if you got to jump here, what are there any plugs we can do here for you on the way out? What's the next content coming up for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm here breaking down mostly NBA playoffs at this point. So if we have any gamblers in the chat, you can follow me on Twitter at IS_SIROIS. I've been posting NBA props pretty much every day. I'm also a big NASCAR bettor, so if you like to watch cars go in circles very, very fast, I'm your guy. I've got picks on pretty much every race, whether it be NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series. Yes, they do race trucks. So give me a follow if that's what you want to check out, especially while we enter the dead zone that is the NFL offseason after the draft.
Check out Isaiah's work. I was certainly excited when Greg, our pal Greg Ehrenberg, said, "Hey, do you want to do the stream?" Isaiah, one of the guys to watch here at the new Stochastic family / Odd Shopper family that I haven't spent a lot of time with, but I've enjoyed seeing your work so far, Isaiah. So I appreciate you giving us some knowledge. Now Neil and I get to flounder for a half hour without anybody to tell us who a defensive player is.
Right. Yeah. We're gonna have no idea who the defensive players are, but that's fine. We don't need to talk about. We just need to talk about underdogs. So we're just gonna talk about how things affect best ball anyway.
I wish you two the best of luck.
Thank you, Isaiah. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Awesome. Thank you all for having me. Take care, y'all.
All right.
Go follow Isaiah right now. Appreciate him hanging out with us and giving us some wisdom as we go. But Neil and I are going to be here for another half hour, guys. So hit that like button down below. Subscribe to Stochastic. For some reason, you're not. Over 88,000 subscribers on this channel right now, and you should be one of them. I could say that as somebody that was on this channel when there was 1 subscriber, and there's me and Josh and Jake Hari doing streams. Now it's evolved. Right. We've got the young guns like Isaiah coming in, the young guns like Neil Orfield.
Young guns like me. That's right.
But it's crazy. Like, it's honestly insane, Neil, how many subscribers are on this channel now. And I'm very pleased that that's the case because nobody works harder than you guys. Yeah.
What even is the number at this point? It is a very, very high. I remember when we broke 70,000, I feel like it might be like 90,000 now. We got to be getting 88,000. I'm seeing on YouTube now. That is, I'm pretty excited about that number. Hopefully within the next, 6 months, we can hit 100,000. Hopefully we can have our old friend Spags coming back, doing more streams with us, steaming us up, getting us some new subscribers. Because I think we can get to 100,000 at least within the year, maybe within the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, for Splash Play, my YouTube channel, which if you want to go subscribe to, hit that at Splash Play Pod, my show with Pete Overzet. We're closing in on 2,000 subscribers, so we're crushing it there one by one, Neil. We're literally one by one. We're getting the door. But if you want to check it out, if you want to talk football all year round, that is where I'm doing that. So check that out too. So Football Outsider subsidiary is Splash Play. Neil, we got defensive players going here. The Lions are coming up next. What is left for you? What could possibly make you excited at this point where we've been streaming for an hour and a half? The draft's been going for 2 days. What would stoke your loins at this point?
I want to see Hendon Hooker. I don't know where I actually want Hendon Hooker to go. So that's the hard thing. Like, I want to see him drafted because he's a quarterback. It's fun when quarterbacks are drafted. Maybe I go back to this view. Yeah, it's probably better, right?
Yeah.
You should be on the
Now,
left.
now they
You're
can really
hosting.
see us and bathe in our beauty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think I'm excited to see where Hendon Hooker. I want to see where Evan Hull goes. I want Evan Hull to go somewhere where he's the RB1 because I drafted a good amount of him, and he was probably undrafted in some drafts. Let's see. I pulled up the Splash Play YouTube pod here, so check this out. Check out Spags and Pete Overzet on the Splash Play pod. I just, as you said it, I looked at it, I was like, oh, I'm not already subscribed to it because every time I go there, it's just when I see you on Twitter. Yeah,
well, I'm glad somebody clicks those links.
Yeah, I click the links. I watch the videos. I talk to you guys sometimes in the videos, not always, but yeah, I always go to the pod. I really enjoy the Splash Play. I just did not realize that I'm not. That happens to me a lot though. I don't always subscribe to things. I just go and when I see the link, I'll go to the video.
Well, that's the hope, is that you don't need people to, like, I've been told subscribers are like a vanity number where obviously it looks good. Certainly if you're at Stochastic's level, it looks like you're a real business and all of that. But ultimately it's like, we have like, I don't know, 75% of our subscribers watch every video, or like 50%, whatever.
Sure.
So it's like, it doesn't matter as long as people are watching and participating. And ultimately that's, that's what we care about. That's what Stochastic cares about, is like having a community that you can talk to, and the hosts, people who are going to be on camera for you, are doing the work and are also gambling their lives away just like you are, hopefully for the best, with the best possible processes. That's certainly what we've always done here at Stochastic. And I know Neil's showdown video is certainly a thing that I would say blatantly stole from to do some Splash Play content during the regular season.
I didn't even notice that you stole for my content, but I'm glad you found it useful.
Doing these cool stream things, like he's doing the lineup build. So what can you do that's different? And I started like building lineups on a show, and I chopped it down to like an 8-minute video. So that was what I was trying to do different, where it's like, because I'm a parent, Neil. I got, I have all the parents
limited time.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about parents all the time.
Now more so. It honestly is one of those things where this is the pick I was gonna say, and we fucking didn't do it. Hendon Hooker goes to Detroit, which very interesting, because the Lions can get out of Jared Goff's contract next year. $5 million is the cap hit if they want to do that. He is a big armed guy, Neil. He is a mobile QB, a guy who ran at Tennessee. You wanted to see him go. I don't know that he plays this year, but if we are drafting for week 17, Hendon Hooker should be a guy you draft in some of your teams for sure.
Yeah, that is exciting. That's an exciting pick for the Lions. What do you think of him as like a dynasty asset?
It's tough because he's a little bit older. With the landing spot for the Lions, I would put him ahead of Will Levis, I think, for dynasty, just because I think Hendon Hooker's a better QB.
Yeah, but like, do you think he has any value this year? Probably. Like, Jared Goff is the guy, right? Until he's out of Detroit, I have to imagine he's the guy. Do you see any value like in drafting Hendon Hooker for best ball this year?
If the Lions are not as good as they should, because they think they should win that division, whether you agree or not, obviously Neil strongly feels differently, but they think they should win that division. If they start 1-5, if they start 2-6, I think that's where you could see the Hooker call start to line up, and he's apparently going to be ready for day one. I would still draft him. I think, where is his ADP in the big board? I have to assume it wasn't that high. He had a 239.8 ADP, so he should probably go in the 200s, and he should be a guy you take, 4 to 8% of, I would think.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. I mean, like, we don't usually handcuff our quarterbacks, right? We handcuff our running backs. We don't usually do it with our quarterbacks, and not even handcuff. I just mean we don't usually take backup quarterbacks necessarily unless we feel confident that they're going to take over at some point during the year. Like, what's his name? The Atlanta quarterback last year.
Ritter,
yeah. We drafted some Ritter thinking like he's going to take over later in the year. I don't feel the same way necessarily about Hendon Hooker that I did with Ritter and Mariota. Like, it felt last year like Ritter's going to take over at some point. I don't know if that's the case for the Lions this year. So it's a little bit sketchier, but yeah, definitely interesting, because if he does end up starting some games, he's going to be an interesting player to have on your team. So yeah, I don't hate the pick. I think maybe there'll be some drafts where I have like 2 good quarterbacks early on and I take my third QB in the last round. I wouldn't mind taking Hendon Hooker there. I see Malakar in the chat, very excited about it. Malakar being a Lions fan, loves the Hooker get there. I was honestly kind of hoping that he'd fall to the Vikings at this point. There was some steam that the Vikings were going to trade up within the first, or they were going to take him in the first round or potentially trade up for somebody else. But there was a lot of talk that he might come to the Vikings. So if we could have gotten him in the third round, I would not have minded that. But congrats to Malakar. You got a new quarterback behind Jared Goff. Nate D says, I love hookers. Yeah, we all do. We all do, Nate.
Yes, only in quarterback form, of course. So that's the only thing you should be paying for. But
That's
no,
what I mean.
I'm with you. I think that Hendon Hooker, to me, like I thought there's a shot he goes to the Vikings in the first round. I think it was certainly a little more likely they went receiver because they basically telegraphed that from literally to the media. It said at the combine, like, yeah, we're going to get a receiver at some point early in the draft. So they did that. But I think Hooker's a nice pickup. I think you as a Vikings fan might be bummed to not have him because what this does now is like, the Vikings don't have a lot of options left to take as a QB of the future now. And they are not going to have Kirk Cousins next year because that contract is like too onerous. So
right.
I think you would have liked to have seen Hooker. And I think it's worse that you're going to see him throwing to Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown for the next 5 years.
Man, if they're good, it's going to be so painful if Hooker ends up being good with those weapons. And he's going to look good with, like, he's going to look better than he is with those weapons. If they end up looking really good, yeah, it's definitely going to be painful. There's been discourse about the Lions picks in general. Spags, how do you feel about the Lions? Like Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 blew my mind, to be honest.
Oh, Tank Dell goes to Houston.
Tank Dell to Houston. All right.
Yeah. So there you go. So you got a landing spot. It's definitely a vacancy there. And I would say for the record too, while we're talking Basketball Mania, and I will answer Neil's question too. I think that Nathaniel Dell, Tank Dell, if we want to go with that name, live just because of how good CJ Stroud is. CJ Stroud is the best analytics passer in this class. He has the best value in terms of under 10 air yards throws, 10 to 20 air yards throws, 20 plus air yards throws. Like he is that dude that I think is going to create value for the pass catchers, even if they're mediocre. So Dell lining up alongside John Mechie, maybe Nico and Robert Woods, hopefully splitting some snaps. Pretty good landing spot for you, Neil, if you are going to be a Tank Dell guy and drafting him a little bit.
So sadly, I am even more so a Robert Woods guy. I drafted a ton of Robert Woods before he was even traded. It was just like, he's clearly going to be traded and he was better than people thought last year. So I was like, I'm just going to take a last round Robert Woods over and over. And then he went to Houston. I was like, that's not the worst landing spot. I feel like it's getting worse and worse. Like, I don't feel that good about my Robert Woods exposure at this point because he is going to be splitting carries with Nico Collins, with John Mechie. Now we've got Tank Dell. So it feels a little bit worse, but there still might be some value in Robert Woods.
Yeah. Anytime you can get the oldest receiver out of a quadrant of receivers, Neil, you got to do it.
You got to take the oldest guy. Absolutely. He's got to show the younger guys how it's done. They need to sit back on the sidelines, watch Robert Woods just for 1 year. That's all I'm asking. 1 year. They need to learn from Robert Woods. That's all I want for the Texans here. I don't actually. So I said Tank Dell, but I think I might have meant Tank Bigsby when I said I was interested in seeing where Tank Dell goes. I don't know that I actually have. Actually, I could probably look that up, can't I? Hang on. Let me see if I can look up
I would think you probably have more Bigsby than Dell relative to the ADPs, I would think.
All right, let's see if I actually have any of them. I could be just completely like, oh, I have Bigsby. Okay, I have Tank Bigsby, 18%.
Okay, so you went pretty relative to the lineups you drafted. That's not an insignificant amount of Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, 8.5 would be average. Yeah, apparently I was really in on Tank Bigsby. I think that just means that I was he was coming to me when I didn't. I go a lot of 0 RB, so I end up with a lot of the late round RBs there. So apparently that's what happened here.
So let me extol some more Hendon Hooker virtues really fast, just because I do think his numbers jump out. And you have to keep in mind, Hendon Hooker played at Tennessee, which again would be a plus. Playing SEC competition is going to be a big thing. But he did play in sort of a gimmicky offense with Josh Heupel, which people have sort of debated a lot on Twitter. Hooker, though, highest catchable ball rate in the class, 83%. I guess just a little bit lower than Jaden Daniels, but Jaden Daniels is not going to have the draft capital. Hooker also the highest ADOT in the class, besides Sam Hartman, who's not likely to get drafted too highly. Hooker at 11.2 ADOT per throw. So definitely getting it downfield. A low interception rate, 0.6% interception rate for him, 0.264 EPA per throw. So Hooker does a lot of stuff that looks good. And another great thing for Hooker, we'll see what he does coming off the ACL tear, but he does run a good amount, 9.4 rushes per game, good for 4.2 yards per carry. He is not Anthony Richardson, but point being, he's more mobile than a kind of statuesque passer. So that's why I think, Neil, that he could play this year. And I think he could actually really give your Vikings headaches if they didn't take him and he ends up being a dude.
Yeah, that would be disappointing for me. Interesting. Saint selected TCU RB Kendre Miller. They might be bracing for an Alvin Kamara suspension.
Yeah, Alvin Kamara might miss half the year.
Yeah.
Kendry Miller, a pretty highly touted prospect by some circles at TCU, 30% avoided tackle rate, not a great EPA per rush guy, but definitely some of the raw bones to get there. 6 feet and height, over 200 pounds, so definitely should have the build. Neil, have you been taking any Kendry Miller, and now is he on your radar? Because we know the Saints certainly do love to run the ball.
I do not believe I have any Kendry. No, I do not have any Kendry Miller. Definitely an interesting. Yeah, I regret not having any of him at this point because he might be the starting running back for the Saints for a period at least, or he could at least be in the mix with Alvin Kamara potentially missing good time here. I actually one player that I drafted a lot of, I believe, and I should. I'm saying this stuff, and now I realize I can fact check myself live while we're talking about it. I think I took a lot of Kamara. I think he was one of the guys that I was like, that's just too low for Kamara. I knew the risks, but yeah, 32% Alvin Kamara in my 34 drafts here. So I knew the risk going in, but I just think that Alvin Kamara, given how good he is when he plays, I'm willing to take on some of that risk.
I worry he's at his dying days of Chris Johnson stage of his career.
Also true. That's very possible.
We'll find out for sure. I think Kendry Miller live, certainly Jamal Williams getting an okay contract, not quite a back-breaking one relative to running back capital like Miles Sanders got or David Montgomery got. But Kendry Miller should be getting drafted now. I think, see, what was his ADP most recently? He was on Underdog at a 189.5 ADP. If Jamal Williams is at 109.3, I think that now Kendry Miller should come to 140 range. He's going to that spot. I think Algier and Charbonnet should go, Neil, but I think he's kind of now a contingent back, but he could win the job in the preseason and it wouldn't be shocking.
Wait, you're talking about Jamal Williams or Kendry Miller?
Kendry Miller, I think, can, if not win the job, win enough of a role and then have the job by week 17.
Yeah, so I feel like I've been completely out on Jamal Williams, and I feel like that's probably dumb of me. Like, I think that might have been a mistake that I made. And again, I've only done 34 drafts, but I've been kind of thinking like last year he luckboxed so much. Like he has negative regression coming out of his asshole. Like so many touchdowns last year just at the goal line for a different team. Now he goes through, like, he's not that good. Like he's a fine running back, but as the backup. But now I don't think I factored in enough that Alvin Kamara is pretty likely to miss a significant amount of time. So maybe a mistake by me not taking Jamal Williams. So I guess I also have 0 Kendry Miller, so I don't even know what I hope. I hope all of the running backs fail, I guess. I hope Alvin Kamara does not get suspended and just crushes this year. That's what I hope. I guess I do know what I hope for.
I will say you see a high avoided tackle rate guy, and that's one thing that I mentioned a lot because it is one of those stats that ports over from the NFL to college. Like Dameon Pierce is a high avoided tackle rate guy in college, ends up being one in the NFL. Same thing for Kenneth Walker last year. So that's a stat that I tend to look at a lot just in terms of your ability to generate value. Miller doing that on turf for a team where it's like him and Jamal Williams, yeah, he can fall into the end zone 11 times, like David's saying in the chat, but he also could just be kind of mediocre between the 20s, and Kendry Miller's going to have opportunity from day one. So I think he is going to be one of the bigger ADP risers out of this draft, which is interesting because a lot of the running backs seem like they're going to be fallers based on the going to the committee backfields. Miller has a real shot to win this job. And I also believe, Neil, a lot in that on the offense. Like, I think they signed Derek Carr to a lot of money because they want to be vertical. They want to do what Josh McDaniels wasn't doing with him in Vegas last year. So I like the Saints. And as a result, I think Kendry Miller is, relative to ADP, my favorite rookie running back right now, I think.
Really? Interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to,
I think Bijan's overvalued. I think if this guy's going to go in the 180s to start BBM, I think you should hammer him until he gets to the 120s.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're very high on Kendry Miller.
It's a good landing spot. And I just also, I've got so much Carr. Like I'm in on the resurgence of Michael Thomas. I'm in on, if he's not there, then Olave will get there. And Rashid Shaheed was also crazy good last year, even though he's kind of a little bit of a gimmick guy, but still getting enough targets to be useful. So I think the Saints are going to be improved. And these are the kind of stands that I like to make in a BBM at this point, Neil, because I think this is one of those takes people start to catch up with more. Like you put together the pieces. I know one thing that Osmo, of course, Alex Baker has said before is like, when you see ownership for going to the receivers and not the quarterback, it's like, why are you not stacking them then? Yep. I think that's the kind of thing where people are going to realize, oh yeah, we take Olave at 30. We take Michael Thomas as he's going to come up probably to like the 80s. Why are we not taking all of New Orleans a lot more? And I think New Orleans will be one of the more undervalued teams to start BBM for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that call. And I definitely play that way too, where I'm seeing like, okay, everybody loves this wide receiver. Why is nobody taking quarterback here. Absolutely a great way to play best ball. Something you should be factored in the correlations there. We just lost Malachar. I did want to ask this. Go back to this question. Spencer Smith wanted to know, Spags, are you going to Brandon Katz's birthday party? Was Brandon Katz involved in chat your days at Osimo, like when you were regular here?
No, our guy, the Brandon Katz of that era was Sean V. If I
Sean V's
recall
still
correctly.
around too. Oh yeah.
And then there was Drop Roses, who was another one who had the bad takes. But no, I'm not part of Brandon Katz's stable. I don't like that he's mean to our pal Eric Lindquist. I think he should be more supportive of Eric's takes because Eric is a very sharp guy, as we both know.
Yeah, he's mean to all of us. He just comes in and he bullies us, Brandon Katz, but we bully him right back. So sometimes I feel bad, like we because he'll come in and be like, "That's a dumb take." Like, he just comes in and straight up is like, "That's a dumb take by Neil," and then of course we go in on him and talk about how bad his takes are, and then I end up feeling kind of bad because like we don't know anything about him. We're just like we respond to him telling us that our takes are dumb. So then we call him dumb, and it's very, very childish, the whole
That's
thing.
the thing too. I don't know if you get it like I do, Neil, because like on Splash Play, it's almost like a bit where like, oh, like I made a bad draft or whatever. Like, when people tell you that, oh, your draft is bad, like it's assuming you've still stacked things and like taken ADPs right and whatever, and you're like, oh, thanks for donating. I will say DFS, you could certainly say that sometimes. Like if you're playing a really chalky lineup in NFL, you're just screwed from day one unless you're doing a cash game tournament. But I would say like in best ball, you don't know what teams you're going to advance out of your pod until you get there, because there were some dog shit teams that advanced both of mine and advanced against mine that were like powerhouse teams, because that's just how best ball works. And I would say that plays certainly the people who aren't going to be playing this tournament to your advantage, because people really think it's all binary. And if you just were willing to embrace 5% outcomes, 10% outcomes, like you're going to give yourself a much better spot.
Absolutely. As long as you're correlating to some extent, like really we don't know all that much. People really overestimate how much we know in best ball, which is why like I end up with pretty flat exposure. And it sounds like you do too. Like we end up with flat exposure. We're not taking huge stands because we understand like there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of volatility. A lot can happen throughout the offseason, throughout the season that changes things. So it's hard to like really have a terrible, like it'll happen. Sometimes there'll be drafts where people like take guys 3 rounds earlier than they need to, and it's like you didn't need to reach there. You could have waited a couple rounds. You still would have been guaranteed to get them. So like there are bad drafts out there, but I'm guessing those are not your drafts. I would have to imagine that you're a pretty good drafter. It's just people disagree with your player takes, and really it's hard to guess what's going to happen in an NFL season.
Right. Yes, I fully agree with that too. And I think, for me, before the draft period, before the NFL draft period, I'm willing to go heavier on player takes. When I do get to the main best ball mania tournament, as well as all the puppies, I do kind of pull that back a little bit more, where I'll still have my leans. Like I'll still get to 25% on guys, though I might try to like get closer to 20 this year. But I think that's where I think there's still some value. You have to talk about Jalen Hyatt going, though. He did have an ADP of 118 in the big board. Came down a little bit during Superflex. He goes to the Giants, Neil, and I'm sure you've been following some of the free agent signings because you were drafting Richie James. Giants have a lot of receivers now. They have a lot of guys in that stable, especially guys who are going to be slot receivers. How do you feel about Jalen Hyatt going to a Giants team that is not pass game prolific and now has a lot of mouths to feed and one more deep ball guy in the mix?
Yeah, that's tough. Not the best landing spot, I would say, for Jalen Hyatt. So who else do they have among their receivers now at this point?
So they brought back Slayton. They have Hodgins. They have Wandale coming back. They still have Sterling Shepard. There's somebody I'm forgetting in that group, but I think there's one. There might be 2 more that I'm blanking.
Are there really? So I don't remember them drafting great receivers. They got they signed a tight end, I thought, to replace
Paris Campbell they signed too.
Oh, Paris Campbell, that's right.
Oh, and Jamison Crowder. So they have Hodgins, they have Paris Campbell, they have Slayton, who's really the only outside receiver out of all these guys. Wandale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Jamison Crowder. Jeff Smith was also a guy at some point, but he's probably more of a camp flyer guy. But point being, they have 6 receivers, Neil, who have gotten regular playing time over their last couple stops.
Yeah, it's interesting. So just moving, I'm looking through who's been drafted in best ball on the Giants. So we got Saquon, Darren Waller, of course. He's going to be, I would imagine, kind of probably the number 1 in terms of targets. Maybe Hodgins beats out Darren Waller, but I think those 2 are probably the top 2. Wandale is interesting. What do you think of Wandale? Like I was actually really high. He was probably I think he was one of my highest exposed wide receivers or players overall last year. I was drafting a ton of Wandale Robinson. All the buzz was that he was going to be great, and then he was hurt basically all year. What do you think of Wandale Robinson?
I think he's definitely got a ceiling, which is what I would look for, especially for best ball, because you really, you could not use Wan'Dale Robinson for 16 weeks next year. And if he gets you the nut game in week 17, like he was worth it. So I think that's where I will certainly grade out a little bit more. But I think Wan'Dale looked really good. The issue is that he's a smaller guy coming off an ACL tear. He's in that youthful range of the spectrum where he should heal fully from it. But then they're bringing back Shepard, adding Paris Campbell, adding, I don't think Crowder's got a whole lot left, but he's still another slot. I worry about him getting the full allotment of routes. And Hodgins was good last year too. And he's kind of a slot, did play outside a little bit. It's just a crowded room to me, Neil, like just because like I think Slayton's good too. And now it's just another guy that's going to take targets away. And this is a team that doesn't want to pass anyway, because they have good running game for the most part.
Yeah, so Isaiah Hodgins is somebody that I thought towards the end of the year, like he might be a wide receiver one. Like teams, like they might just treat him as like this is their stud receiver. Kind of seems like they're not really doing that, because they do like several. I mean, they just took Jalen Hyatt. They have so many receivers in house there. They traded for Darren Waller, so maybe they don't see Isaiah Hodgins as their wide receiver one, but definitely pretty interesting.
Oh, so this is another interesting one that goes. So we're going on a receiver run. Thought we might go on a running back run. Cedric Tillman goes to the Browns. So this is some of our Browns fans of the chatter guy, Nate, saying, why couldn't Jalen Hyatt go to the Browns? I think you might have gotten a more complete receiver in Cedric Tillman, a guy who is really, to me, one of the only guys besides Quentin Johnson who is going to be that X receiver and play outside, be willing to get some outside targets, and can be a big bodied guy. He's 6'3", I mean, maybe 6'2" in his official measurements, over 215 pounds, and was really good out wide in Tennessee in the previous year, then kind of lost his role because he was hurt this year. Jalen Hyatt moved ahead of him. But Tillman's a guy, Neil, that I was tacking onto a lot of my drafts. And as I'm a believer in Cleveland again this year, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is a nice landing spot for Tillman. Is he a guy that you imagine being on your radar, with the Browns admittedly having some guys with Donovan Peoples-Jones, Amari Cooper, and also, of course, new acquisition Elijah Moore on the team?
Yeah, so I did not draft any Tillman, sadly. So that's a little bit hurtful there that I did not get to any Tillman. I do have a good amount of Elijah Moore. Maybe that's a stack that I'll try out in BBM4. Yeah, it's I don't know what to make of the Browns. I also like I think my moral objection to Deshaun Watson plays into it a little bit. Like I'm just like, I can't draft Deshaun Watson, so I end up not drafting too many from the Browns, which is a leak, to be honest. And like, you can't be drafting based on your morals in fantasy sports. It's something that I don't usually fall for, like in season long. I picked up Deshaun Watson in one of my season long leagues, but for some reason, best ball, I just like, I'm not gonna where he's going at ADP. I've been hesitant, and I think it's partially a moral thing. So it's probably something that I should probably a leak for me in my game. But I do not have a ton of Deshaun Watson, but certainly could have a bounce back year here. Nice landing spot there for Tillman. Hopefully Elijah Moore also looks good. I was drafting a lot of Elijah Moore when he was on the Jets, and I was like, they're going to get Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to be so good. I was kind of thinking anybody's going to be a huge upgrade for Elijah Moore was really what I was thinking. I was like, I think he's a talented receiver. Anybody's going to be an upgrade over Zach Wilson is the reason I was drafting him. So he's probably in a good spot here with the Browns too.
Yeah, I don't know that Tillman has a great pathway to starting and getting a full allotment of routes from day one, just because I do think Peoples-Jones is pretty good. Cooper is pretty good. Those guys are going to play outside over him. But do you want to guess, Neil, how much Tillman I have in the non-super flex big board?
I'm going to guess 20%.
Very close, 22%. Cedric Tillman,
which is like a max for you, right?
Not in the big board. I did go over 55% in the big board, just because I was crazy about Dalton.
Tell me about it.
Crazy about Anthony Richardson. So those are my two stands that I went a little bit outside the range for, just because I thought they were mispriced the entire time. Kincaid, I don't know that I feel great about that, because I do think Dawson Knox is comfortably ahead, but there were some reports about Kincaid playing out of the slot for Buffalo and being like their 3 receiver, which would be pretty good. So, but Richardson, to me, having 52% Richardson, I think if I win the big board, it'll be because I just would not draft Anthony Richardson.
So, so you think? Sorry, you said he's a tight end who could be eligible. Dalton Kincaid, tight end eligible, who's going to be playing wide receiver. That would be amazing for Dalton Kincaid.
Yes, that would be a great outcome, but I still feel less good about the 55% I have of him compared to the 52 of Richardson, just because I was taking Richardson in the beginning of the big board when he was basically going for free in the 20th round. And I will say, guys, if you're going to do BBM4, Richardson is going to be one of the players that gets steamed up the fastest. He's going to enter with like a 138 ADP. I think by the time the weekend ends, he will have a 105-ish ADP would be my guess.
So, I mean, do you think he's going to be that low to begin? Because I think they actually reset. Like Hayden Winks comes out with like a ranking that he does, and that's where they start with the ADP. So maybe he will be a little bit higher.
I mean, I think in previous years, I thought they just carried it over from the previous like same 1-to-1 format. At least that was what I recall from last year. I don't
Okay,
know.
so maybe Hayden Winks does it at the beginning of the first format, and then they carry that over. That could be the case.
Yeah, I will find out. I mean, I'm certainly curious, but yeah, that if I'm going to have anything that wins me the big board, it's going to be just blindly taking Richardson and also taking Rashad Penny at 200 range when before he signed. Like I think that's one of my aces up my sleeve to balance out the ungodly amounts of Tyler Algier I have everywhere else.
Right. Yeah. Carlos Mendes says, who needs morals when you can win $3 million? Yeah. I mean, and it's also because like me picking him has nothing to like, doesn't affect his life one bit. So like in this case, it's kind of silly to have morals because like, it doesn't matter where I pick him. Somebody's going to pick him. So it really does in this case, not make a whole lot of sense to care about how a player is as a person. But for some reason, I think it's just like it's a bias that I have against Deshaun Watson in particular.
So
Yeah.
So, Neil, we got about 5 minutes left. Is there
Yeah.
anything about Underdog that we should be saying to people now? Because, like, I think we've made the best sales pitch we can in terms of BBM4. I will say the best sales pitch I can make is that it's a lot of fun. Like, I enjoy it a lot. It is one of my favorite things to do. Like, I'll put it on. I have one of those little iPhone holder stands. I'll work out, do my gym workout, put the phone there, do a draft in between sets. I'll make sure to keep an eye on the clock and all that. It's a lot of fun. I think you got to go out of your way to really do it. $3 million to first place. Again, be over 18 plus. Use that promo code Stochastic to double your deposit on there. But Neil, what else can we say about BBM4? Because we both love it, and I hope that energy kind of just carries people through.
Yeah, well, so we've been talking all day about best ball, which I love best ball. I'm almost certainly going to max out this BBM4. I love the contest, $15 million in prizes, but also they have daily drafts like for all sports. I've been doing those. I think that they're softer than DFS. The competition not nearly as good because generally pros not willing to spend the time on drafts as opposed to just like using an optimizer to make a lineup. So I generally think the daily contests on Underdog are a little bit softer than DFS. I got super into them towards the end of the NFL season, started doing them a little bit for NBA as well. So I'd say that is one of the benefits of Underdog. The other thing is like for me, I'm in Minnesota. We can't sports bet here in Minnesota. We can do the pick'em stuff on Underdog. So you can actually make pick'em cards on Underdog in Minnesota, even though we can't go to traditional sports books. So there are a lot of different ways to have fun at Underdog. It doesn't have to be best ball. But then also, just talking about best ball, depending on how much time you have, as I said, I like to do the slow drafts where I can do 10 of them at a time. Honestly, sometimes like 20, 30 of them at a time. Gets a little bit overwhelming when you do that number, but you can do a number of slow drafts at a time. It's a ton of fun. You're just going to have, several times per day, like maybe once an hour. If you're doing 10, you're going to get a ping saying it's your pick. You have 8 hours to make that pick in the slow draft. So I actually really enjoy those slow drafts. But if you have time to really dedicate to it, if you have, I don't know, an hour or so, you can do a fast draft and it's a ton of fun as well. So yeah, highly recommend it. I'm a huge fan of Underdog. You should check it out.
Yeah, really great UX too. Like I'm sure I'll do DK's best ball tournament again because I'm sure they'll do a similar structure of cheap entry fees with the big prize pool. But that's the way the tournament's structured as well. At the end in week 17, like we talked about, the most important week, you have to beat out other 440 entries there. DK will probably be another 1,000 again. So you give yourself the best shot you'll ever have to win $3 million. And obviously that's not saying a lot there. A very difficult thing to do. Obviously Neil's done the $1 million number a few times, but still $3 million, Neil. Like you can't fight that prize pool. Like that is legitimately life-changing money. As I don't know if you follow Crane that closely, Neil, but he's been in Paris. He's doing all these fun trips. Yeah, he's launching his own company. Like you really are making dreams for yourself if you somehow pull off this win.
In Paris, eating like lamb brains or something. I forget, like sweetbreads. It's actually not brains apparently, but I watched a bit of that stream. I was actually trying to watch a good amount, but then ran out of time. So I only probably saw the first hour and a half. I think you were on that ship chasing stream, right? But I did not get to the part where I could have seen you on the stream, sadly. So
more importantly, you've been stretched being a complete alcoholic, not alcoholic, but just going off the deep end in terms of the alcohol, but in the most entertaining way possible. But yes, a great show. If you're really looking for some downtime content for yourself, you want to rewatch a night one draft stream, I would check out the ship chasing stream with all those guys. Anything else, Neil, that we should plug here? Of course, I'll give my plugs. Follow me at Chris Spags. Hit the like button on this video. Subscribe to Stochastic if you're not already, which you should be. Again, the best and the brightest minds in DFS and betting and all of that are in this world. And I'm certainly proud to have been a part of that legacy, but also just to watch these guys and soak in their knowledge. So that's my plugs here. And of course, at Splash Play Pod on YouTube. Check that out. Neil, what are your plugs?
Yeah, I mean, people, this is a Stochastic channel. This is where you're going to find all of my stuff. So I think most of the people watching probably know, but I think I'll be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central Time. I think I have an MLB stream with Adam Ship My Money Share. We'll be doing an MLB stream tomorrow. You're going to find all of my stuff here. And of course, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS if you haven't already. But I don't have any other really plugs for my stuff. Check out my High Stakes podcast. Comes out like every other Friday, approximately. It's not exactly that, but I talk with some of the best minds in the DFS or related spaces about betting and DFS. So check out the High Stakes podcast. But yeah, make sure you're following Chris Spags on Twitter. Go to follow that Splash Play Pod. Follow my lead, as I just followed it apparently earlier today. I thought I was following it already, but apparently I wasn't. So check out the
It's
Splash
okay,
Play
Neil.
Pod.
Neil, you're on board now. It's all that matters. Glad to have you in the mix. And
I'm a huge fan of both Chris Spags and Pete Overzet. I didn't realize I was not following that particular.
Well, here's the thing. The biggest plug for us, Neil, is you can find us in Basketball Mania 4 lobbies this weekend. You can follow.
Absolutely.
You can find at Chris Spags. You can find at Player Q DFS. You're Player Q DFS on Underdog too, right?
I'm just Player Q on
Underdog. Okay, yeah. We've done a draft, I think, inadvertently at some point where I've seen you in there before. But yeah, Neil will be on there. If you see our names, you can't chat to us or anything, but feel free to tweet or whatever, because I think I'm dead serious when I say, like, this is not an ad read. Like, some of the things that we've certainly done on Stochastic, it's like, you're playing a little, you're not really all. I live and breathe this stuff and enjoy it, and I think you guys will too. So go check it out. That's the best plug I can give.
All right. Well, I think that's a good enough plug. I think we've reached 901. I see Malakar just came back. Sorry, Malakar. We are just ending the stream. So go do some more dishes, I guess. I'm sorry that you did those dishes and now you're back. And now we're oh yeah, you got to flip your hat. Don't you have another hat? You do a bit with your hat. Do you have the money?
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, so we got a money hat here.
Just one more time for old
guys.
time's
It's two hats on. Money time, guys. Good luck. Enjoy your weekends. Enjoy the rest of the NFL draft. Go check out some Stochastic content. Win some money for yourself in DFS and sports betting this weekend. And I appreciate getting to hang out with you guys. So have a great weekend. See you guys soon. Good luck.
Later, guys. Thank you.